The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Hello, this is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews, and we are live streaming tonight. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are. It is an absolute honor and a privilege to have you tuning in to tonight's broadcast. We are going to be continuing with our reading of the Milner-Fabian Conspiracy by Ioan Ratiu. I've been saying his name, I think, incorrectly for the last 13 installments of this video series. I think it's Juan or Jon, or I don't know how to say it right now. I just know that I've been saying it wrong this whole time. But Ratiu is his last name, and this is a 2012 book explaining all about how the world came to be as it is. It's been a fascinating read. It's an incredible romp through history, starting with the formation of the Fabian Society, and in fact, going back even further, deeper into history than the Fabian Society's formation, because we learn in the book about Marxism and Karl Marx himself and how that whole thing got kicked off. And then through the chapters and through the course of the last 13 videos, we've been making our way to the present day. And now we are reading about the topic of immigration. We're on a chapter which is very long, and we've done the first half of it in the last video, and today we're going to be finishing this chapter off. And so if you are tuning in live, I can see we've got Frank, we've got ESP over on Odyssey, we've got Elizabeth and Celine Lyon over on YouTube. Good evening to you all. If you're tuning in live, it's wonderful to have you here. If you're watching the replay, there'll be a pinned video. No, there'll be a pinned comment under the video with timestamps in it that you can use to navigate to the relevant part of the video that you're interested in, accelerate your learning, and minimize the amount of time it takes to get that information in your ears, because that's what it's all about. Unless you are reading along in the video, then you can get it in your eyes as well, or you can do both. The more eagle-eyed among you tonight might be able to see that there is a slight change to the background and the layout of my home broadcasting studio, which is not really a studio, it's my office / library. Yeah, that is because I actually finally managed to get all my books unpacked and onto shelves here in the room that I'm sitting in. I spent a good 6 hours doing that last night, and it was a lot of fun getting all the books out and grouping them together, organizing them, putting them back on the shelves by theme. And now they're all in here, the whole Hayes Reviews library, bar about 6 or 7 books that I decided I was going to get rid of. And it's not very often that I do that, but I'm actually at the point where I think I'm going to have to institute some kind of one in, one out policy because I have a lot of shelf space in here and they're all full. But that gives me a nice warm feeling inside to be surrounded by bookshelves full of books. And what gives me an even warmer feeling is to be broadcasting live and reading those books to people who are interested in the world, interested in history, who have questions, and who recognize that we don't often get good answers in the mainstream. I often say the mainstream is a stream because it is shallow. It's a nice place to go on a warm day and dip your toe in and have a little paddle and play around, and it's safe and nothing bad's really going to happen in the mainstream. You know, even though the mainstream is full of bad news and terror and fear all the time, people like to hang out there because that's where everybody hangs out, and there's safety in numbers, And if you believe what the mainstream tells you, then you get to hang out with a bunch of other people who believe it, and they reinforce that in you, and you feel good because you are similar to all the people around you, and you get this sense of belonging and this sense of my identity is good and solid and safe and on secure ground, because all these people around me couldn't possibly be wrong, could they? Well, yes, they could. And so what we tend to do here is acknowledge that the mainstream is very shallow. It doesn't give you a good, deep account of events, and definitely not historical events. And even the events that are going on in the present day. It's sound bites, it's little snippets of emotive language that are designed to trigger emotional reactions within you, which drive behaviors, and it is all about stimulus response. It's Pavlovian conditioning. It's meant to drive your emotions in such a way that you will behave in a certain way. And that is another feature of that, is to get people to argue and fight and discuss with each other the hot topics of the day, the big events that have been downloaded via the mainstream media channels. That's not what we do on this channel. What we do here is we try to get a little bit deeper by reading books and looking at sources that are more detailed and that have a lot more dense information than a 2-minute news report that you might get on your evening news fix, right? So as you might be aware, the title of this video is part 14, because that's how many 3-hour live streams we've done so far, chewing through this excellent book that we are going to be reading from tonight. So we got LJ in the YouTube chat as well. Lovely to see you here. Very happy to have you here. And I do have a preamble ramble for you tonight, and I'm going to get right into it without any more nattering on, because we got a lot of reading to get through, and we've also got quite a chunky preamble ramble to get through. But before I do that, I'm going to just refresh myself and tell you what topics are on the docket for tonight. So we've got immigration and the church, and then the part after that we're going to be reading is the Rochdale case and anti-white racism. And so I thought about this anti-white racism, and I thought, let's dig into that a little bit and use that as the theme to construct our preamble ramble tonight. And then, as luck would have it, or as the universe would have it, because I don't tend to believe in luck so much these days as I do synchronicity and God's providence and the cause and effect nature of reality, I was prompted by my phone that the memory was full and I had to go and delete some stuff, otherwise it wasn't going to work or let me do anything or access any of my apps. So I started scrolling through all of the pictures, and I'm looking for things for delete, and I've had this phone now 4 years, so there's a lot of treasured memories on there, funny videos from places I used to live, jobs I used to do, colleagues, friends, holidays, all that good stuff is on there. And I came across and all the stuff that I amassed and collected through the lockdowns, right? So quite a bit of stuff on there as well, touching on these kind of topics of lockdowns and all the things that we were going through back then. And one of the things I found was a short 2-minute video, and I saved it to my phone, and it made for absolutely perfect viewing. And I thought I would include it on tonight's preamble ramble and use it as a starting point for the topic and the discussion tonight. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you a video, and it's 2 minutes 17 seconds long, and there's a bit of music to it. And I'll just say up front now that this, in my view, is a great classic piece of propaganda. It's quite a funny video, not funny haha, but just funny as in odd, because there's some music which is not particularly uplifting and feel good. I think the music has been deliberately chosen. It's definitely trying to paint a picture. It's definitely trying to stir up some emotions. And it's, well, why am I describing it? I can just show it. Okay. So this is the first thing I got to show you tonight. I'm just going to make sure we've got some audio so you can hear the music. And I'm just going to play this and we can watch it along. And then we'll continue with our preamble ramble afterwards. So here we go. There it is. That's the end. It's kind of an abrupt ending. Now, I don't know where this video came from. I don't know who made it, but I saved it and I wanted to preserve it because it leaves quite an impression. Now, apart from the dreary, droning music with the lyrics that sound something like "Before I Die Alone," you know, that music on its own has the sort of effect of making time slow down. But this sort of relentless, back-to-back onslaught, one after the other, of headlines, all which could all be put in this category of anti-white racism, and so the video is quite clearly, obviously, designed to evoke an emotional reaction, to stir up some fear, some discomfort. It's not meant to be pleasing. It's not meant to be uplifting and feel good and happy, right? And it's got some of these headlines superimposed on top of different video footage in the background. I suspect that might be just to keep people watching and keep people keep their attention. But it's quite an impactful little clip. But I don't want to take it on face value, right? I don't want to come away from watching this clip, and I don't want you to come away from watching this clip with feeling like any alarm or stress or fear. So I thought, well, let's dive in and find out: are all these news stories real? Are they true? Are they just made up? You know, you could probably put together a video like this in this day and age with some kind of software tool, maybe even Photoshop and a video editor and some fairly low-level video editing skills. You could whip up this video and nobody would be the wiser, right? So I thought, what I'll do then for my preamble ramble tonight is I'll go through all these headlines and I'll find out if they are in fact actually news stories that have been published. And that's what I did. That's what I spent an hour doing. And guess what? They're well, you can find out the results now because I'm going to show you. All right. So the first headline is, why does a white guy always have to be the hero? And this is from Mother Jones. And this is a brief history of whitewashing from Charlie Chan to the Great Wall. So that headline was a real one. This is a February 18th article, 2017. This one in the Sunday Times was, just the Times. This one was, if I had a choice, I wouldn't be a whitey. And this is also a real story. I didn't do the little, it's behind a paywall, but it starts off, speaking as a white man, don't we have ghastly complexions? Par-baked, like those bread rolls you can buy in supermarkets. We look like not quite the finished product. Glancing at the person opposite on the tube the other day, I thought, if only I could be that color. That's the Times. That's a real story in the Times. That's just a blank, empty tab. This one is an op-ed from 2020. Proudly Jewish, proudly gay, reluctantly white. And this is from a rabbi, I think. And yeah, he's pretty unhappy about being right. No problem with being Jewish and gay, but being white is the part of his identity that he feels somehow ashamed of or bad about. Quite interesting. What else we got? Oh, this story I searched for, and this one had been deleted. I can't remember. I don't know the name of the article now, but not all of them are still in existence. Some of them have been scrubbed and memory holed. So in this case, the author was like, no, maybe they felt bad, or they went back on what they previously thought and they got rid of it. This one, the headline on this one was, white savior films are problematic, here's why. And we got a Wikipedia article and Flicksphere, 18 problematic white savior films that should never have hit theaters. But we didn't get a hit for the exact headline, but a lot of other stuff that's linked to it. Why you shouldn't watch The Help and other white savior story films. A critical analysis of white savior films. Save cinema from the white savior. A white savior film that isn't harmful, but is still problematic. Yeah, and on and on and on, right? Dear fellow white men in tech, stop it. It's like, with the tone of a kind of a moody teacher who's a bit hungover on a Monday morning talking to a naughty student, right? This is from April 2020, Dylan Thomas Doyle. Interestingly, the clip in the video had this writer, his name was different. He had like a double barrel last name. It was Dylan Doyle something. And then when I went to the actual website, it was Dylan Thomas Doyle. I don't know if he got married, changed his name, something like that. But he wants white men in tech to stop it. Just stop it. You should know better. Right. This is Vogue. And that little thing popping down at the top is hiding the headline. So they're obviously ashamed of it. That's annoying, isn't it? What's the headline? Come on. Oh, that's the headline there. Britain is racist. There. I said it. Well, how do you tally that? All of Britain? Does it mean all of Britain? Britain is racist, but nobody wants Britain. I mean, we're obviously racist because we don't let anybody who isn't British come here, and we keep our borders locked and our airports secure and our docks chained up, and nobody who isn't British is allowed to come here and stay in this country and hang out here and start businesses and buy property and invest and own football teams and study and all that other stuff. Nobody. So that's how racist we are in Britain. This is funny. Facts don't change even when US administrators do. So this is the Washington Post, and it's got a paywall, as you can see. And this is something about how autopsies can uphold white racism. Then there was a headline on the video which said, "Why white people concerned about black people looting is racist." And this is by somebody called Marley Kay. And I didn't get a hit on this article, but I did find Marley Kay. She has a website down here somewhere. No, that's Bob Marley. She's an anti-racism writer. There it is. Marleyisms. Why white people being concerned about looting is racist. So the implication of that headline is that if you're a non-white person and you're concerned about looting, that's fine. But if you're a white person concerned about looting, it's racist. Obviously. Makes perfect sense, right? Site can't be reached. Her site's gone down. You can't even get to her website anymore. Somebody has pulled the plug on that particular resource. Here's one. Today's parent. Here's what you should know about baby wearing and cultural appropriation. I don't know what baby wearing is. Wearing babies, baby wearing, like it's like the child is some sort of accessory. This is by Jennifer Lee. This is 2023. A little more recent than some of these articles. What was interesting was that this article in the video had a different headline. So I took a screen grab to show you. In the video it says, "The way you choose to carry your child might be racist." And then, oh no, actually that's a different, I think that's a different article, isn't it? Oh yeah, my bad. It's just using the same image there. So that's why I thought it was the same article. But it's a similar sort of topic. The way you choose to carry your child might be racist. And here's what you should know. So they're always written with this tone of condescending. I know better than you. Let me tell you. Here's what you should know. Here's why. Here's why you should know this. This is why this is this way. It's always a talking down to you kind of tone in these headlines. Then we've got the white male is the biggest risk in spreading the V. And that's V for virus, not V for injection. So yeah, the white male is the biggest problem, and this is specifically older white men are to blame for the fact that the government is continuing their policy of locking people in their homes and browbeating them and bullying them and scaring them into submission. It's because of older white men. So that's pretty nasty, right? You can't really say that. I mean, as I've said before on the channel, it's worth repeating. If you just take out the word white and put in any other color of person, would you accept it, right? If you saw a headline that was like, "The black male is the biggest risk in spreading the virus," do you think that headline will get published and remain online for 5 years? Nearly? No, of course it wouldn't. The brown male is the biggest risk in spreading the virus. Right? No, the Chinese male, the yellow male is the biggest risk in spreading the. No, it wouldn't be allowed. This is up. It's allowed. Richard Stocko. Yep, no problem. Article's still there 5 years later. Quartz. Finally, the US admits it. AP classes are way too white. Yeah, just too many white people. I think this is the ideal proportion of whites to non-whites in this picture here. That seems to be what they're suggesting. This is the Walrus with a headline, "The Unwatchable Whiteness of Holiday Movies." Too many white people enjoying the holidays, and it's unwatchable. I mean, a lot of the holiday movies actually are watchable, but it's not because of the whiteness. This is GQ. Why are my fellow whites still so awful at naming children? Why are you picking on your fellow whites, dude? Come on. Again, this is anti-white racism. 17 foods that white people have ruined. It's a real article from 2016. So it goes back. They've been planting the seed for a while. Kevin Nguyen, that's a Vietnamese last name. White people can ruin literally anything. This healthy pho that sounds absolutely horrific. Lil Tasty. WTF is this white person recipe? And then it just goes on. These are all, I suppose, Instagram posts, Twitter posts. White people have really ruined a good classic. This is gentrification on a plate. That last bit is kind of funny, actually. White people ruin everything. White people still trying to ruin hummus. This is funny. But, you know, again, if you were going to go on the internet and start pasting all over your social media, damn, black people ruin everything. Black people are ruining the hummus. Black people trying to ruin the chicken, right? Your account's not going to last very long. I might get this live stream nuked just for saying what I just said. That's how sensitive they are in one direction, but not the other direction, right? That's the point that we're trying to make. Yeah, they just keep going. These are almost like made by bots. It's just the same phrase in white people ruin everything. White people ruin everything. And that one has the same misspelling of the word ruin. There you go, ruin everything. And again, ruin. None of these people can spell the word ruin. No, they can't actually. I'm having a brain fart. Ruin is correctly spelled there. For some reason, it just looked wrong. They're spelling ruin correctly. My bad. I've just been staring at the word for too long. You know when that happens? You look at the word for too long and it starts to not make sense and go strange in your mind. All right, here's another one. The Daily Wire. Salvation Army wants white donors to offer sincere apology for their racism. And that's from 2021. Joseph Curl. This one was, the headline was, "When white people take up too much space," and the author was Vrinda Jagota. And I found the article, but this was like a copy of the article on a website that seems a bit dodgy. But this author, Vrinda Jagota, writes for The Independent. She has her own website as well. And she's talking about white people take up too much space. Mother Jones, white people, please stop asking people of color dumb questions. Yeah, there is such a thing as a stupid question. It's a question that is asked by a white person to a non-white person, right? State of the Planet published, well, let's see, where's the story on this one? There is no story on this one. Not sure what happened there. Vox, study, telling white people they'll be outnumbered makes them hate welfare more. White racism keeps hurting programs that help the poor. So there's a lot to unpack in there. I'm not going to try and do it now. But again, the white person is the bad guy. It's anti-white racism. The global dominance of white people is thanks to the potato. And I mentioned in the last stream that white people are not globally dominant. We're a minority. I mean, I say we, like, I don't even know what is and isn't designated white these days. But if you're just going purely on like fairer skin and a lighter shade of skin, then we're a minority globally. If you discount like Asian, Chinese, Korean, Japanese type people. But it's nothing to do with anything, industry or architecture or innovation or culture. No, it's the potato. It's the potato. If there is any success that we can celebrate as a race, it's all thanks to the potato, according to this article. Yeah, so there's your history for you. Another one, Yahoo. Black student claims too many white people at center. This is a space for people of color. This is an absolute classic example. If you just reverse it, okay, white student claims too many black people at center. This is a place for white people. You know, that the outrage, you get arrested for that. You can get, you know, you couldn't write that headline and have it published on anything that was remotely mainstream. You could probably get away with it on a little private blog that nobody reads. But I mean, come on, just do the reversal and see if it sounds racist. If it sounds racist when you reverse it, then that's telling you that this is racist. Bon Appetit published, when did recipe writing get so whitewashed? Priya Krishna, 2020. Yeah, apparently writing recipes is colonial, white, racist pastime. The Arrow published, why people of color need spaces without white people. And another classic example. Why white people need spaces without people of color? You can't say it, right? You're not allowed to say that. Yeah, it just goes on and on. The Guardian published, hockey has long been about white machismo. And it shows a picture of a black hockey player to illustrate the point. But that was from 2019. The Sharonda Tribune publishes, white people, here's why moving to a good school in a good neighborhood is racist. So if you want to move to a good school in a good neighborhood, you're a racist. And you should feel bad. BuzzFeed.news published, white women drive me crazy. And I bet they wouldn't dare publish black women drive me crazy or brown women drive me crazy, would they? No, of course not. This website published why I won't date white women anymore. It's because you're an anti-white racist, isn't it? Because if I come out, if I'm not dating black women, no way. I will never date a black woman. I'm going to get called a racist. Oh, yeah? But you can openly and happily and comfortably say that you're not going to date white women. Not a problem. The Cut published, am I finally done with white guys? Grist published, dear white people, we need to talk about your diet's carbon footprint. So not only are we racist and evil, but we're eating too many potatoes. The potatoes are causing too much carbon. Oh no, is it the potato? I don't know. I didn't read the article because it's stupid. But yeah, not only are it's us eating and existing and being alive that is causing the end of the earth. Basically, that's a subtext. This one was published 2019, March 29. Donald Glover is right. I'm sick of white people cancelling things on my behalf, says Alex Miller, 12th of May 2021. Quartz published, if you're white, science says you're probably a racist. Science, the science, TM. So if you remember back in the days of lockdown, Anthony Fauci came out and he said that he is the science, right? So I think what this means is if you're white, Anthony Fauci says you're probably a racist. Now what? Why white people can't dance? They're traumatized. That's answering the question. But there's plenty of white people that can dance. We got RD, the left behind. Why are white American Christians so racist? Why? Anti-white racism. Why white people rarely shut up, listen, and learn about race. Dear white people, all you ever do is talk. Now, shut up. That one didn't actually hit an article, but it came up with this one, which is the Odyssey Online, which is, dear white people, please shut the F up. And this one just says, shut up, white people. June the 12th, 2020. 1199 published, white folks, racism is our problem. It's our problem. Nobody else's. Just us. Just ours. Dear white people, it's time to shut up and listen. And this one says, I'm tired of good white people. How dare white people stop be good? Just what an absolute insult it is to have to put up with good white people. Complex MTV forces white people to face their whiteness in new documentary. White people. Like, can you imagine forcing black people to face their blackness in a new documentary? Black people? Like, you can't. It just wouldn't fly. James Ellis, the third, says, I'm so weary of hearing I'm sorry from white people. Just stop it. Stop apologizing. Stop being good. Shut up. Stop eating your potatoes. Stop eating your diet. Well, what should we do then? AT&T employee training program says, white people, you are the problem. All of these headlines that were featured in that video I showed at the start, these stories are all from that video. Walmart CRT, that's critical race theory. Walmart CRT training encourages employees to accept that white is not right. I wouldn't like to work at Walmart anyway, but that's another reason why working at Walmart is not a good place to be. NPR says, why is American classical music so white? Published in 2019. It's like, why is reggae music so non-white? Here's a good one. Dear God, help me to hate white people. And I had to spend a bit of time on this one because that headline is insane. But don't worry, it's not racist, because, as the author of the article explains, if we take the prayer at face value instead of misreading it, you thought this was racist, didn't you? Well, you're misreading it. So don't misread it. The prayer suggests that she does not actually hate white people. Yeah. Right? Help me to hate white people. Okay. Because she doesn't hate them, but deep down she wants to. But that's not racist. Wanting to hate white people is not racist. She knows she shouldn't want to, and so she offers the prayer to God. Instead of actually doing it, hating the white people, she turns it over to God. This is what imprecatory psalms do. I've never heard of imprecatory psalms before, but now I have, and that's what they do. So if there's something that you don't do that is bad, that you want to do that is bad, then you can pray to God to help you do it. And that's an imprecatory psalm. Got that? We've got another little paywall thingy here getting in the way. I should have typed this into... okay, can't see the headline for that one. Apologies. This is the cut. Start your trial now. Sign in. The weird connection between smiling and racism. That's the headline there in the background. You can just see it. This one is, America's problem is that white people want it to be a failed state. So that's why America is the way it is. It's because of white people who want it to be that way, according to this article in the Medium. Then The World published, white Americans are the biggest terror threat in the United States. That was published in 2016. The biggest terror threat in the United States, this guy with a tattoo on the back of his head. The Huntington News published, white men overcrowd the orchestral industry. Classical music is too white. And MSNBC published, Glenn Youngkin's victory proves white ignorance is a powerful weapon. So that's their response to a Republican governor winning in democracy. Back to the Washington Post. We can't see it because of this pop-up thingy. And the Washington Post says here, it's time to stop talking about racism with white people. Yeah, so they want us to shut up and stop being good and stop apologizing. And they're also going to stop talking to us about being racist. Makes perfect sense. And then Mother Jones has the end of white America. This is a 2012 article, and they just announced the end of white America, and they're talking about all the unsavory corners of American society reacting to the announcement that non-white babies now account for the majority of births in the US, right? And if you react to that, if you're not comfortable with that little factoid, that means you are from the unsavory corner of society. And it's the end of white America right there, the title, headline. Up front, the end. It's the end. And that is the end of my little journey into the headlines on that video at the start. So what do you think about that? We got Armory1 over on Rumble. Hello, hello. Saying, oh, snap. ESP as well mentions Fred Astaire. Yes, excellent dancer. And he was white. And then we got over on YouTube, Slowboy Whiteboard throwing in the popcorn. Frank Lennon responding to the video saying, oh my God, if that isn't the fomenting of hate, I don't know what it could be. Those publications have much to answer for. We got Matteo, Jeanette, and Adam as well. Good evening to you all. Slowboy Whiteboy says as well, you're not going to mention how those journalists and authors are Jewish or were educated in Frankfurt School universities. I didn't know that. I didn't look into it. I didn't have time. I just was looking for the headlines to see if there were real articles that exist. If that's true, I am happy for... I'll look forward to your live stream explaining it and pointing that out. Celine Lyon, you see the same thing on UK websites. The majority of the models are not white. H&M Marksons. Yeah, I noticed that. In the supermarkets as well. Massive posters of non-white people on the side of buildings, on the side of supermarkets in predominantly white towns. A lot of that in the UK, actually. All over the place. So that's my little intro. And I'm going to end it there pretty much and get to the book very shortly. But the whole point of showing that is to highlight the double standard and to point out to people that there is an absolute bias going on in certain sections of the media, trying to plant this seed of racism. And that's all it is. It is racism. It's anti-white racism, but it's just, racism full stop. You don't even need to go and say it's anti-white racism. It's just racism. There's no real gain, in my opinion, to fall into this trap of feeling victimized, even though there is a clear bias in certain media outlets and advertising and marketing and all that sort of thing, right? The solution is, if you're worried about it, definitely getting married and having children, right? Raising strong families. If you're working on that, then great, you're part of the solution. But we can sit here all day and kind of complain about the color of the people on the posters on the bus stops and whatnot. But my point is just that people don't realize that media is full of this kind of programming and that it plants seeds which become opinions, which become actions and values and attitudes in the real world when we're interacting with each other. And I think it's a great exercise, that one we just went through, to prove that this does exist, and then start investigating where's it coming from and what's the purpose behind it. Slowboy Whiteboard sounds like he's been on this trail of learning and investigation a little longer than I have, saying I have had videos pointing out that issue struck, and this is my 5th channel. All right, this could be the end of Hayes Reviews then, if we're starting to get close to the really spicy topic, eh? And if that is the case, we'll pop back over here, and I will remind everybody that if you want to support the show or stay in touch with me, you can go to allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews, and you can find out all the things you need to stay in touch and support me and the work, just in case this channel gets nuked. You can send me an email. You can donate in a variety of ways. You can send crypto and join me on Twixter, Telegram, Instagram. You can watch the channels on Rumble, Odyssey, Entropy, and YouTube. You can listen to my album on SoundCloud, and you can also join my free community, which is devised. And that's what it looked like when you sign up and join the community. We've got 51 members now, which is very exciting. This is free. You can get involved, sign up to the forum, go to the classroom section where you can watch our book club replays of reading through 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. This is an excellent book. Even if you don't join the community to watch the replays, I recommend buying a copy of this book and reading it. It was way ahead of its time. Way ahead of its time. In the classroom, you can also find a link to the private Telegram group chat where I hang out all day, every day, pretty much. Got some really, really intelligent people in there with massive collections of books, lots of questions going around, resources, analysis, ideas. It's a fun place to hang out, and you are welcome to join us if you are, good, mild-mannered, decent person with a curiosity and an interest in learning and helping others learn as well, with respect and decency and all that good stuff. I've also got some book reviews. Well, there's just one in here at the minute, but there's going to be more soon. Also on the devised community, you can get the calendar, which has got the events, the timetable, the schedule. If you click these, you can find the Zoom link. You click the Zoom link, you can join the call, talk to me twice a week on Wednesdays and Saturdays. It would be very good to meet you, get to know you, and see you there. So that's allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. Find everything. Stay in touch just in case this channel gets nuked, which I'm starting to worry it will be now, especially with that Scrabble game that you're playing in the chat there, Slowboy Whiteboard. He's just throwing out random letters. I don't know what they spell. No idea. Never seen that word before in my life. There's a number in there as well. He's put a 0. Alrighty. So Heidi over on Rumble is saying that she's cleaning her fish tank right now and it's dirty because of the whitefish. It's just racism on the face of it. Where's it coming from? And don't fall for it. That's the important thing. As I've said many times on the channel before as well, this is part of divide and conquer. Turn groups of people against one another. Try and find ways to keep populations in disarray so they can never organize, pool their resources, and get rid of the people who are really causing the problem, right? The parasite class, the managerial, technocratic, scientific world controllers who've built all these systems and put them in place in order to keep everyone confused, disorganized, in a state of disarray. That's what it's all about. And racism feeds into that. But so you got to inoculate yourself. Oh, well, don't inoculate yourself. That's a bad metaphor to use. You want to arm yourself with the tools and the weaponry to see propaganda, to see mind control, to see culture creation and social engineers for what they are, and recognize all the tools and the tricks and the methodologies that they use against you on a daily basis. And if you want the bottom line, the bluff, they call it in the corporate world, the bottom line up front, the bluff. If you want the bluff, turn your screens off and go and read some books and talk to human beings around you in your communities, your families, and just spend less time on media in general, because pretty much all of it is weaponized. Pretty much all of it is there to confuse and confound and convolute your understanding of reality and what's going on in the world and how to move forward and make your life better. Yeah, everything out there is stupid. It's all controlled opposition, everything except my channel. My channel is the only one where you're going to get good information. No, you know, I don't mean that. But you are going to get good information tonight. But it's not because of me or anything I do. It's all because of this man, Ratiu, and his excellent book, The Milner-Fabian Conspiracy. So let's get into tonight's reading. We've got 41 pages to get through, which is a massive amount. But some really good topics. And I am expecting this one to be as impressive, hard-hitting, well-researched, and powerful as the last sort of chapter and a half have been. He really hit his stride about 2 chapters ago. And now we're just getting it. He's into his flow, and we are finding some absolute nuggets. So, first section we're going to be reading tonight is Immigration and the Church. Just want to make sure my microphone's in the right place. Okay, here we go. Immigration and the Church. While other sections of the establishment shifted their allegiance from their fellow nationals to foreign interests and immigrants, the Church might have been expected to be a rock against the anti-national tide sweeping over Britain and other Western countries. After all, Western society is based on the unchanging values of Christian tradition, which the Church is supposed to uphold and defend. Foremost among these values is righteousness, which, as Scripture shows, consists of truth, order, and justice. God, whom the Bible beautifully describes as the Son of Righteousness, is the highest truth. The natural order which God established when he made heaven and earth by his breath or spirit, and which can be seen in the orderly manner heavenly bodies are positioned in the sky, in the rhythmic rising and setting of the sun, in the division of time into days and nights, in the change of the seasons, in the biological cycle of birth, growth, and death, is a revelation of divine truth and the right order of things upon which God's creation is built. And justice is the adherence to the divine law, whereby truth and order are upheld in human society. The Christian concept of righteousness goes back to the Gospels, and beyond them to ancient Greece, the cradle of European civilization. The first and highest commandment taught by Christ is to love God. But to love God, our Heavenly Father, in the biblical sense, means to dutifully act according to his will and law. Thus, obedience to the law of God and upholding righteousness, that is, truth, order, and justice on earth, is the highest duty of all Christians and, above all, of the Christian Church. The ideal Christian society, or kingdom of God, is defined by righteousness, peace, and joy. Only by the steadfast adherence to righteousness, to the right vision, right belief, and right action can man, both individually and collectively, attain real and lasting peace and joy. Adherence to righteousness, therefore, is not so much a choice as it is a duty which man owes to God, to his fellow man, and to himself. It is a duty that obliges us to oppose everything that violates righteousness. For example, anti-national and anti-Christian policies such as mass immigration, multiculturalism, and Islamization. Policies which go against established truth, order, and justice. The second commandment taught by Christ, namely to love one's neighbor, is second in importance and cannot be used, as relativist and obscurantist church leaders have attempted to do, to override the first. It certainly cannot be used to promote mass immigration. Firstly, because neighbor in Christ's sermons refers for the most part to members of the same community, not to strangers or immigrants from other parts of the world. Secondly, because if we truly love our neighbors, we cannot put the interests of strangers above those of our neighbors, nor the interests of other communities or nations above those of our own. Thirdly, because mass immigration results in injustice to the host population. And fourthly, because mass immigration serves the agenda of vested interests and therefore promotes evil. Moreover, the Pharisees, who style themselves apostles of Christian love, are at a loss when asked to explain why they hate their indigenous European neighbors so much that they want to see them replaced with non-Europeans. Love and compassion, which result in injustice, are instruments of evil. It would be grotesque to imagine even for a moment that God could have intended the faithful to work evil. It would be a gross injustice for a ruler whose duty it is to protect his subjects, to give the country away to strangers and evict his subjects from the land, as it would be for a father to give his house away to strangers and leave his own children homeless. Nor is there any evidence that Christ ever prescribed such a course of action for his followers. On the contrary, Christ himself did not tolerate injustice or evil. He chased money changers from the temple, drove out demons, and called on his disciples to slay his enemies. God, who is the embodiment of righteousness, cannot be indifferent to injustice, and nor can those who believe in him. As observed by the Church Fathers, injustice lays upon Christians the duty to fight in the cause of justice. As Christ sacrificed himself on the cross for the sake of mankind, Christians must sacrifice themselves on the battlefield for the sake of God and their brethren. Martyrdom in the cause of right is central to Christian tradition and the path to eternal life. The takeover of Christian lands by Muslims in the Middle Ages was seen as an act of injustice and a threat to Christianity by the church leaders of the time, leading to the Crusades in the Middle East and the Reconquista in Spain. It is certainly un-Christian to deny the Christian faith and surrender to socialism or Islam. Miscegenation, particularly when leading to corruption of the true faith, which is what it tends to do in today's confused multicultural society, is equally frowned upon in the Bible, and those who actively oppose it are commended. Far from being a Christian belief, the notion that mass immigration, miscegenation, and the fusion of the races are part of some divine plan emanates from anti-Christian quarters. For example, an article in the US Masonic magazine New Age states, quote, "God's plan is dedicated to the unification of all races, religions, and creeds. This plan, dedicated to the new order of things, is to make all things new, a new nation, a new race, a new civilization, and a new religion." Such statements are understandable. Freemasonry is a left-wing anti-Christian movement, which the Church itself has always strongly condemned. Moreover, they are contradicted by the Bible, which states that nations were made by God, and that on Judgment Day they will be gathered before Christ, who will divide them into righteous and unrighteous ones, and sit in judgment over them. Thus, there can be no divine plan to fuse all nations into one. The Church has not always put immigrants above natives. For example, in the early 1900s, it campaigned for the primacy of African natives' interests vis-à-vis those of European immigrants. How the Christian Church, the heir of Greece and Rome, and for centuries the backbone of Western civilization, has come to abandon God, his law, and his faithful, and embrace anti-Christian teachings, is explained by the subversive activities of left-wing financial interests. Left-wing infiltrators and saboteurs, as well as by the influence of vested financial interests. How far the Church has come to identify its objectives with those of the latter is evident from the shares it holds in oil and mining companies controlled by the Anglo-American establishment, such as Shell, BP, Exxon, Chevron, and Anglo-American, as well as by the admission of the Archbishop of York, John Sentamu, that, quote, "We have all gone to this temple called money. We have all worshipped at it. We, including the Church, have all been enslaved." To be enslaved by money means to do the bidding of those who control money. In a speech at the International Eucharistic Congress in Dublin, Peter Sutherland, of the appropriately named Goldman Sachs Bank and Vatican advisor, while admitting that, quote, "immigration can be a disruptive force," quoted left-wing Pope John Paul II on a spurious, quote, "new model of the unity of the human race," and urged church leaders to embrace mass immigration as a Christian duty. But there is no Christian duty to submit to a corrupt and oppressive establishment. On the contrary, it is a Christian duty to stand up to corruption and oppression. The revolutionary message of Christianity may often be overlooked in a text written under conditions of religious and political persecution. Yet, it is undeniable and crystal clear there can be no peace without justice. Christ himself declared that he came not to bring peace on earth but a sword, and to re-establish the law of God. As the Gospel says, "He hath put down the mighty from their seats and exalted them of low degree." This makes Christianity a fundamentally revolutionary religion in the original sense of the word, whose object is to overthrow corrupt establishments and restore the rule of righteousness. Indeed, salvation, that is, liberation from evil, from the clutches of the forces of unrighteousness, is the central message of Christianity. But true salvation cannot be brought about at a personal level only. It must be brought about at national and world level also. As the gospel again says, he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us. The objective and critical examination of its connections with the international money power, as well as its actions and teachings, particularly from the second half of the 20th century, shows that they are contrary to authentic Christian tradition, and that, far from being in a position to save us, the church itself is beyond redemption. Given that church leaders are prepared to sacrifice indigenous European Christians on the altar of money interests, or mammon, the right-believing faithful are left with little choice but to shake off their passivity and subservience to a false church and seize the initiative, become the standard bearers of the God of righteousness and take up the struggle in his cause. Like Christ, they must chase the wrongdoers from the temple and the demons from their midst and build a new church and a true kingdom of God on earth. So there you are, you lazy Christians. Get off your ass. Go and cast out the moneylenders. All right. But we all know that the white Christians are too busy subverting America, apparently. Heidi's letting us know over on Rumble. Martyrdom doesn't mean to die. It means to witness. Those calling out the controllers at risk to their own pleasure and leisure are witnesses, martyrs. If not Christian martyrs, martyrs for truth. Oh, I didn't know that about the word martyrdom. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. Right, so we're on to the anti-white racism section now. And Frank Lennon has a book to recommend, which is Infiltration by Dr. Taylor Marshall. I haven't heard of that one, Frank. Can you pop that in the Telegram chat, please, so I don't forget about it and miss it? I'll look it up. All right, so the next section is anti-white racism. So continuing. Further investigation, which media outfits like the Daily Mail could have carried out had they been even remotely concerned with the interests of the general public, reveals that while the left-wing establishment claims to promote equality among races, it has taken full advantage of existing racial differences. Already in the 1960s, under the influence of both Marxism and America's left-wing inspired black consciousness movement, the following emerged as the central ideas in the ideology of the left. 1. Racial polarization was to be considered as the best stimulus to progressive change in ethnic relations. 2. All non-white people were to be considered as a single group called black and standing in opposition to white people. A similar concept, black and minority ethnic, or BME, but that's BAME now, isn't it? B-A-M-E, which is black, Asian, minority ethnic, I think, has been used for the same purpose of creating a united opposition to the white indigenous population. 3. Ethnic relations in British cities were to be seen in terms of the position of black people throughout the world and of the British colonial legacy. This is a clear example and incontrovertible proof of the socialist tactic of polarizing society into antagonistic groups and then using one group deemed exploited, oppressed, and progressive against another group deemed exploiting, oppressive, and backward or reactionary. Socialism had always divided society into exploited proletarians, or the working class, and exploiting bourgeoisie, the middle class. Over time, the socialist concept of exploited proletariat was extended to the peoples of the Third World. The earlier working class versus middle class ideology was replaced with Third World versus First World, or black versus white. While earlier socialism had divided society into proletariat and bourgeoisie, the post-war socialist scheme divided it into blacks and whites as an instrument of social engineering for socialist ends. Thus, the new socialist scheme came to replace the native working class, which socialism had originally claimed to represent, with non-white immigrants. As the socialist elite sided with the latter, whites became the new middle class, the new bourgeoisie enemy, or scapegoat class, to be eliminated in the world socialist revolution. It may be noted that more recently this phobia of white people has reached pathological levels, with left-wing equality experts demanding that fairies in children's books be depicted in dark colours and that children be given paper other than white on which to draw, allegedly to prevent racism. I didn't know about that white paper one. That's kind of funny. But that's from the Sunday Telegraph. Already in the 1940s, the Labour Party leadership believed that British people had more in common with the people of the Dominions than with those of Europe. Gradually, Labour leaders came to identify themselves more and more with the world's non-white populations with which they allied themselves against the whites, a trend articulated earlier by leading Fabians like Frank Horrobin of the Colonial Bureau, who declared that the black inhabitants of Earth have a long and fearful score to pay off against their white brethren. Similarly, leading Milner Group members like Lionel Curtis and David Astor supported anti-white movements in various parts of the former empire. The study of race relations in Britain was pioneered by the Institute of Race Relations, which had its origins in Chatham House's Race Relations Unit, established in 1952. In 1962, IRR, or the Institute of Race Relations, set up the Commonwealth Immigrants Advisory Council as an advisory body to the Home Secretary on Commonwealth immigrants. Meanwhile, in 1964, leading Labour activists David Pitt of the Greater London Council and Hamza Alavi formed the immigrant organisation Campaign Against Racial Discrimination. In 1965, the Institute for Race Relations, in collaboration with the Campaign Against Racial Discrimination, prominent Fabian R.M. Titmuss, and others, was involved in the creation of the National Committee for Commonwealth Immigrants, which ostensibly aimed to promote goodwill and facilitate the integration of Commonwealth immigrants. Also in the 1960s, Labour-controlled local authorities, including the Greater London Council, were instrumental in facilitating the housing of non-white immigrants through loans, enabling those groups to benefit from such schemes out of proportion to their numbers. In the 1970s, local Labour councils in many London boroughs waged aggressive race equality initiatives, including systematic employment of more immigrants, compulsory anti-racist staff indoctrination, generous grant aid to immigrant initiatives, and inclusion of immigrant groups in the government machinery. In particular, the practice of preferential employment of non-white persons, deceptively called equal opportunity policy, became widespread in Labour-controlled local councils. In the 1980s, Ken Redken Livingston vowed to use the council machinery as part of a political campaign in defence of socialist policies. Under Livingstone's leadership, the GLC, in collaboration with the Inner London Education Authority, launched an anti-racism campaign which identified white people as a, quote, problem. John Carr, Ken's colleague on the GLC until 1986, promoted the imposition of racial quotas, requesting those receiving public contracts to use a certain ratio of ethnic workers. Local councils openly announced that waiting lists for borough-owned homes were to be restricted to black applicants. Between 2000 and 2008, under Livingstone as Mayor of London, the left-wing race relations industry was able to continue its policies of promoting the growth of the immigrant population. It may be noted that Livingstone's race relations advisor was left-wing black activist Lee Jasper, who infamously claimed that blacks cannot be racist, and apparently made that claim on BBC London radio. Projects started by the left have a distinct tendency to turn into something else over time. That's the Fabian way, isn't it? The little totalitarian tiptoe, as David Icke likes to call it, which I think is a fantastic phrase. Community and race relation organizations have mutated from welfare organization to representatives of the minorities. The activities themselves are often the activists themselves are often immigrants or of immigrant descent. For example, David Pitt and Hamza Alavi of CARD were from Grenada and Pakistan, respectively. Balavanir Sivanandan, Director Emeritus of IRR, is Sri Lankan. Likewise, leading Labourites like Jack Straw, Peter Mandelson, Ed Miliband and Sadiq Khan are of immigrant extraction, and so are leading Conservatives like Michael Howard, Andrew Feldman, Saida Warsi, Boris Johnson, and to a lesser degree David Cameron. It follows that the institutional promotion of the immigrant minority tends to lead to an immigrant-centered society in which the race relations industry becomes the new political system and the immigrant population, led by race relations activists and agitators, becomes the new ruling class. Promoting the immigrant minority also means restricting the rights of the indigenous majority, so that, quote, freedom and, quote, justice for immigrants become unfreedom and injustice for the natives. Indeed, while promoting immigrants and immigration, Labour introduced unprecedented discriminatory legislation designed to restrict the rights of the indigenous population. In collaboration with immigrant-dominated CARD and allied organisations, Home Secretary Frank Soskis, the son of Russian immigrant and left-wing revolutionary David Soskis, introduced the 1965 Race Relations Act, the first in British history, which made it illegal for landlords to select a tenant or buyer for a property on racial grounds. In effect, the Act made it difficult, if not impossible, for indigenous communities to defend themselves against the state-enforced encroachment of mass immigration. The Act also created the Race Relations Board, which was set up in the following year by the incoming Home Secretary and former Fabian Society Chairman Roy Jenkins. And just remind people as well that if you are reacting to this reading and these topics with incredulity, or in other words, with disbelief, or with a sense of, no, that can't be right, just remember that the clip I played at the start of last Friday's stream, which was Keir Starmer admitting that the country has been undergoing an open border experiment that has been done deliberately and has happened as a matter of policy, which makes all of this history showing how it's been done, how gradually, step by step, we've been brought to this point, is reliable and believable. So, this Roy Jenkins guy keeps popping up. We got to look into him at some point. Continuing. In addition, it was insisted that community relations councils be controlled by the immigrant minorities and speak for them. No councils controlled by the indigenous majority were ever proposed, encouraged, or even allowed. On the contrary, organizations opposed to immigration, like the Racial Preservation Society, had to be formed by private citizens and were forced to fight endless battles against malicious accusations of racism from influential, well-funded and aggressive anti-racist and anti-fascist groups. Another notorious anti-fascist tactic was to prevent immigration critics from using good-speaking sites. I suppose that's like physical places, isn't it, when he says good-speaking sites? But that's, again, classic tactic. You're allowed to advocate and create groups and organizations which are going to benefit a certain part of the population. But if you do the same for another part of the population, it's racist and terrible and fascist. So you see, it's just that. Just reverse it. Just take out the label, take out one color and put in another color, and suddenly it's problematic and racist, and we need to talk about it. And white people, stop it. Don't forget. So it's just nonsense, really, on the face of it. I mean, the double standard is nonsense, right? Because it's like an arbitrary contradiction. Either you can set up groups and advocate for any race or no races. You see what I mean? You got to apply it evenly across the board. But that's not the way it's done. In 1967, Home Secretary Roy Jenkins drafted a race relations bill leading to the Second Race Relations Act, introduced by James Callaghan in the following year, which established the Community Relations Commission. In 1976, Roy Jenkins, again as Labour Home Secretary and from 1973 Trilateral Commission member, introduced the Third Race Relations Act, which merged the RRB and the CRC to form the Commission for Racial Equality with new enforcement powers. The inquisitorial CRE, along with the Equal Opportunities Commission, also created the Roy Jenkins in 1975, and a wide range of immigrant-oriented inner-city and other programs became the key instrument through which Labour further enforced its immigrationist policies. The CRE was also involved in setting up the Brussels-based Standing Conference on Racial Equality in Europe, no doubt with the aim of enforcing race equality not only in the UK but all over Europe. Indeed, as part of its global approach to migration and mobility programme, the EU has stressed that although its immigration policy is meant to be of mutual benefit to both the EU and its non-European partners, it should be migrant-centred. Yep, we gotta turn the systems and the structures that exist in this part of the world to the benefit of people coming from all over the world. It just doesn't make any sense. It is evident from Labour programmatic papers like A Policy for Equality and that the Labour policy of race equality aimed to change the power relations between white and black people in favour of the non-white immigrant population. It's also evident from Labour papers like John Carr's New Roads to Equality, advocating the imposition of racial quotas, that Labour's policy aimed to change the numerical white-black relation in favour of the non-white immigrant population. It follows that Labour's racial equality policies are not about equal treatment of different races, but about making non-white immigrant groups numerically equal and eventually superior to the white indigenous population. The overall result was that, in just a few decades, the immigrant population rose from thousands in 1951 to millions in 1991. That's a short amount of time, right? I mean, if the ones who were already here in 1951 were having a lot of children, you wouldn't get to millions 40 years later. So it's about importing lots more, deliberately. In 2006, Britain's Labour government passed an Equality Act which established the Equality and Human Rights Commission. In 2008, the EHRC commissioned a study on interethnic relations by the Institute of Social and Economic Research at Essex University. The ISER's findings were published in May 2009 as a report entitled Ethnicity and Family: Relationships Within and Between Ethnic Groups. Commenting on the report, a spokesman for the Equality Commission said, 1 in 5 of our children are from an ethnic minority background, and young people are 6 times more likely to be mixed race compared to adults. This is hugely positive, and we can afford a moment to celebrate. Presumably, the Equality Commission will celebrate even more when not 1 but 5 in 5 of British children are from an ethnic minority background. Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? It's like, what is the right ratio, and how, and who's going to announce that, and then who's going to maintain it and make sure it's maintained? And these kind of questions are never involved, right? It's always just like more non-white people equals good. And just, but until what amount? You can't ask that question, you're racist. The Commission will not have to wait long for its final celebration. Figures provided by the Office for National Statistics show that by 2009, London's Indigenous population had been reduced to 59%. I think it's less than half now, isn't it? At ward level, this was as low as 10%. This means that in some areas, the Indigenous population has become a small minority. Similar developments can be seen elsewhere: Birmingham, Bradford, Leicester, etc. Needless to say, in addition to the genetic loss, this also amounts to an unacceptable loss of territory to Britain's Indigenous communities. Without territory, the Indigenous people are unable to survive and reproduce. Although most whites are not consciously aware of the extent of their predicament, a report by the Office of Communities and Local Governments in 2008 showed that the vast majority of white Britons feel that they have no influence on local and national decisions and that their aspirations are disregarded by the political system. I mean, that is borne out by the recent, what was it? It was a government petition, wasn't it? The 3 million people signed saying they wanted a redo, a do-over, another vote, another election. Just was ignored as far as I know. It just fizzled out. No one's mentioned it since. All right. More cheerful topics. The Rochdale case and anti-white racism. Evidence shows that when white Britons make complaints of harassment and hatred against them, they are attacked by non-white mobs while the police forces systematically refuse to prosecute the culprits or even investigate the reported crime. That's a story from the Daily Telegraph. An emblematic example of this is the infamous Rochdale case, in which, for many years, criminals from Britain's Pakistani community were reportedly allowed by the police forces to rape underage white girls and force them into prostitution with impunity. And that's from the Daily Telegraph story as well. To their credit, both the judge who heard the case and the chairman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission pointed out that race had played a part in the crime. In contrast, police chiefs have arrogantly and irresponsibly insisted it isn't about a race issue. And that's from claiming Rochdale grooming not about race is fatuous in the Daily Telegraph. It may be pointed out in response that even Baroness Warsi, Conservative Party co-chairman and a member of the Pakistani community, conceded in an interview with the Evening Standard that a section of Pakistani men living in Britain see white women as fair game, the obvious implication being that in her view, race was a factor. That's from the Evening Standard. The same applies to Mohammed Shafiq, head of the Ramadan Foundation and a Pakistani, who admitted that gangs of Pakistani men sexually abusing white girls were a problem. That was in the Daily Mail. In light of the above, what is the explanation for this disturbing and shameful behaviour on the part of the police and other authorities? It has been suggested by some that the authorities were paralysed by fear of being seen as critical of Muslims or racist. This obviously raises wider issues. While the authorities do appear to be lenient towards Muslims who commit crimes against whites, this leniency extends to immigrants in general and non-white immigrants in particular. There is a tendency for the authorities to refuse to see crimes committed by non-whites against whites as race-related. Lee Jasper, former race relations advisor to the Mayor of London, has claimed that blacks cannot be racist, on the spurious theory that only those who are in a position of power can be racist. So what if you're a mayor then? What if you're an actor, a movie star? What if you're a top-level sports star or something, right? Stupid. Lost my place. The stupidity derailed me. Oh, here we are. However, a black person who is in a position to inflict harm on whites, for example, by sexually abusing them, is indisputably in a position of power in relation to his victims. In light of deliberate inaction on the part of the authorities, it is perhaps unsurprising that the protest group English Defence League joined forces with members of the Sikh community, which reportedly had similar experience with Muslim gangs. While the anti-Indigenous mass media predictably portray legitimate and spontaneous protests as disturbing, such protests may be a sign that Britain's white community is finally trying to take hold of its own life and defend its legitimate self-interests. This seems to be confirmed by other small yet significant steps in this direction taken, for example, by a taxi firm in Rochdale, which now offers white drivers to customers. However, male immigrants, and not just Muslims, may target Indigenous women even when no crime is involved. For example, in 2008, half of Britain's black Caribbean men, amounting to 1% of the total population, or over 600,000, were in a relationship with white women. Given the numbers involved, this cannot be accidental. It must be the result of deliberate policy on the part of the men involved. This conclusion is confirmed by the prominent Black Caribbean psychiatrist and activist Franz Fanton, who found that the dominant concern among Black Caribbean men arriving in Europe in the 50s was to go to bed with a white woman. Fannon observes that a character in a work by the black writer René Maran, which he believes to be autobiographical, states that the majority of blacks tend to marry in Europe not so much out of love as for the satisfaction of being the master of a European woman, which reveals a racist desire to dominate and suppress white people. Fannon's findings clearly show that the white community cannot be indifferent to this wider problem, particularly in light of the fact that A, there are other immigrant groups with a high percentage of white partners, such as the Chinese, and increasingly Muslims from Africa, the Middle East and Asia, often with links to enemy interests, Communist Party of China and Islamist groups, etc. And that B, as will become apparent from the data given below, this trend is encouraged by the media and entertainment industries and other sections of the establishment. It follows that exclusively focusing on criminal elements from the Pakistani community ignores or covers up a wider problem involving immigrant groups. It also gives the wrong signals, suggesting that white women are of no value to the majority community and can be used by male immigrants for their own purposes as long as no criminal activity is involved. If that is the message, then it cannot be surprising that immigrants see indigenous women as fair game. In turn, this is part of the growing elite manufactured culture in which the sole purpose of the white race is to promote other races at its own expense. Similar to laboratory animals living and dying for the benefit of cosmetic and pharmaceutical corporations. This self-sacrificial or suicidal attitude is best exemplified by the charity industry, which is catering almost exclusively for the perceived needs of the third world. Hang on a sec, I'm just going to have a sip. Oh, sorry, I didn't manage to mute myself there. Sorry about that. I have a pretty good rate. I have a pretty good track record of muting myself when I'm coughing and spluttering, so can't get it right every time, can we? Oh, we got Sadie Sapiente over on Rumble. Good evening. Very nice to have you here, indeed. Got LJ as well and Trevor McDonald over on YouTube. Hope you're doing fine out there. We are continuing now. Page 374. It must also be noted that the police evidently are not paralyzed when it comes to arresting whites for allegedly racially aggravated harassment or public order offences, when the latter are merely venting their legitimate frustration at state-enforced mass immigration and its horrific consequences, such as loss of ethnic and cultural identity and territorial dispossession. In scenes disturbingly reminiscent of Stalinist Russia and Maoist China, law-abiding white Britons who tell immigrants to go home or otherwise verbally express their opposition to mass immigration are hauled before the courts by the police, ritually humiliated in front of the international media, and locked up with professional criminals, rapists, murderers, and paedophiles. And that's a Daily Mail story about a tube racist whose champagne-fueled tirade was viewed on YouTube, got 5 months in prison. The fact that Britons fighting for democracy in places like Iraq and Afghanistan are celebrated as heroes, whereas those standing up for democracy at home are treated like criminals, clearly shows that the establishment is not serious about upholding democracy on the home front. In fact, the very existence and almost indiscriminate use of phrases like racially aggravated and similar terminology shows that the legal system itself is race-centered and promotes an elite-engineered racial agenda. It follows that it is not a case of paralysis, but an institutional trend among the state authorities to actively side with non-white immigrant elements against the white indigenous population. This, of course, is part and parcel of the system. Like the Parliament and other institutions of British, quote, liberal democracy, the police forces are an instrument for preserving the rule of the establishment, that is, of the clique responsible for mass immigration and the breakdown of indigenous society. Indeed, the objective analysis of police behaviour indicates that the main function and concern of police officers is not to protect the indigenous majority population, but to keep the establishment and themselves in power and the public under control. The same applies to the Crown Prosecution Service, which initially refused to take action against the Rochdale gang, and the immigration authorities who allowed the gang to enter and settle in Britain. Incidentally, the Crown Prosecution Service parroted the police line that the Rochdale case had nothing to do with race. When the state itself has become anti-white, the organs of the state, like the legislature, judiciary, and supporting authorities like the police forces, cannot be anything else than instruments of oppression against the indigenous white population. The media, of course, play an important role in all this. Just days after reporting on the Rochdale case, The Sun brought out a semi-pornographic piece that was as tasteless as it was disrespectful to the Rochdale victims, sporting the front page banner, "Tongue Direction, Zayn Snogs Little Mix Perry," and a picture of Pakistani One Direction singer Zayn Malik snogging English pop star Perry Edwards of the pro-diversity girl band Little Mix. Melanie Phillips, in her Daily Mail article, correctly points out that when it comes to matters to do with minorities or Islam, the British mind simply switches off. Indeed, there is compelling evidence that a significant percentage of the British population is in denial about problems associated with immigration. But this denial is a symptom of the underlying collective trauma suffered by the indigenous population as a result of the drastic social and cultural changes imposed on it by the treacherous ruling order. Another symptom of this trauma is the white indigenous population's loss of the ability or willpower to protect its most valuable asset, its women and children. Having had its sense of ethnic and cultural identity and sense of honour amputated by the ruling elites, the indigenous population is now in the process of losing its survival instinct and will to live, poisoned by the elite-imposed belief in its own unworthiness of life. Together with other obvious symptoms such as declining fertility and rising incidents of alcoholism, mental illness, and suicide, this state of affairs proves that Western liberal democracy is a self-destructive system that can only result in the annihilation of Western civilization, culture, and society. Well, this is really heavy going. Excuse me, tickly throat. All right, continuing. Thus, the lesson that must be drawn from the objective and critical analysis of establishment behaviour is that behind every exposed lie there is a bigger lie being covered up. Behind every indicted crime there is a worse crime being condoned, committed, or planned. And behind even the greatest horror there is a still greater horror waiting to unfold. The Rochdale case was subsequently overshadowed by the Rotherham and other cases in which even larger numbers of young white females, some as young as 11, were systematically subjected to sexual exploitation, abuse, violence and humiliation by organised groups of Pakistani and African males over many years. In March 2007, the EU presidency declared that new forms of racism have taken shape in the wake of globalisation and the formation of multi-ethnic societies. This is a clear admission that elite-engineered globalism and multi-ethnicism have resulted in new forms of racism, but while this new racism is officially seen as affecting non-white minorities, what is being covered up are the ways in which it is affecting the white majority. Whatever may have been the original intention, mass immigration has become a new form of colonialism, while race relations policies have degenerated into overt Anglophobia or Europhobia on the continent and elsewhere, as well as inverted anti-white discrimination and racism. And he mentions a book here by an author called Faye. First name is Guillaume or something. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but Guillaume or Guillaume. And the book is The Colonization of Europe. And that is printed by a publisher called Arctos Media, ARKTOS. And they have lots and lots of titles actually on their website available. One of them that I bought, not from their website, but I found it in a secondhand bookshop. Hang on a sec. I'll show you it now. Is this book here. The Blackening of Europe by Claire Ellis, Volume 1. Volume 2 is now available, but the shipping is pretty extortionate. So to get a copy of a thin paperback book, which is, it's quite thin, sent to the UK, it's going to cost me like 50 or 60 quid. But that book's hard to find, as you might imagine. Just like this book's very hard to find. It seems to be that there are certain things written in books that are hard to find than others, right? But Arctos Media is ARKTOS. That's a place where you can buy books that cover these topics and more. So, continuing on. In particular, the truth that the ruling order does not want the public to know is that mass immigration and its consequences are inextricably connected with the anti-colonial and racial policies of the international left and its liberal capitalist paymasters. Anti-colonialism was championed from the early 1900s by the Fabian socialist-inspired Labour Party and allied elements of the liberal Milner Group. Mass immigration was made possible by legislation introduced by the Fabian socialist Clement Attlee in the late 1940s. The study of race relations in Britain was pioneered in the 50s by the Institute of Race Relations, a branch of Fabian-associated Chatham House, chaired by the Secretary of the Eugenics Society, Alexander Carr Saunders. Subsequent race relations policies, along with other far-reaching radical social reforms, were shaped by former Fabian Society chairman and Trilateral Commission member Roy Jenkins. There he is again. As the architects of immigrationist developments from Clement Attlee and Roy Jenkins to Tony Blair and Gordon Brown all have been followers of Fabian socialism and members of the Fabian Society, which aims to reconstruct society on Fabian socialist lines, it is difficult to avoid the conclusion that the promotion of the immigrant population at the expense of the indigenous community has been part of the Fabian socialist plan. It may also be recalled that the Trilateral Commission, of which Roy Jenkins was a member, was founded by longtime Fabian socialism supporter David Rockefeller. This clearly links the Fabian socialist plan with the international money power which was responsible for the creation of the UN and the EU. That is a very important little summary in that paragraph there. We're going to put a blue sticker on that page. The same treacherous Milner-Fabian clique which instigated, organized and financed anti-colonial movements in Africa and South Asia in the 1900s is now instigating, organizing and financing the colonization of Europe by Africans and South Asians. While earlier the slogan was independence and quit India, now it is interdependence, open Britain, Europe, open Europe, open Britain, diversity and inclusiveness. All because it suits the money power's self-serving designs. The money power's outfits, the UN and the EU, are the organizations that are currently spearheading the global effort to suppress Europe's indigenous culture, civilization and people while promoting everyone else's. A leading figure in this campaign is Peter Sutherland, former chairman of Goldman Sachs, LSE, that's the London School of Economics, and the Trilateral Commission, and current head of the United Nations Global Forum on Migration and Development. In June 2012, Sutherland openly called for the EU to create multicultural nations and to undermine national homogeneity and sense of difference from others. That's Peter Sutherland. Another name worth knowing. We got Shame Anarchist as well. Hello, hello. And Heidi checking out Mass Immigration as Colonialism. I see it more as eugenics, which is now called ethics in academia, but I haven't thought that through. Gotta go. We'll watch the remainder on the replay. Take it easy, Heidi. Thanks for checking in. Always good to see you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Right. So, linking in the Fabian Society and this international socialism with the money powers is a really critical thing, because smashing through that illusion of capitalism versus socialism, and showing that it's actually the same people who control the money and print the money and hand out the money, controlling both sides of those of that dialectic. That's really important. And this book does a great job of explaining that. And it gives you all the names that you need to look into. So let's continue with race relations and the media. Is football being rocked by racism? Another reliable indicator of the money power's true intentions is the behavior of the media, entertainment, and advertising industries which the money power owns and controls. In May 2012, The Sun published an exclusive story under the front page headline Messi in Race Row, in which the black Dutch footballer Royston Drenthe claimed that the Argentine player Lionel Messi had insulted him by calling him a Negro. Messi always says Negro, Negro, and I can't stand it. That was reported in The Sun. In fact, it emerges from the story that Messi's exact words were Hola, Negro, which in Spanish means hello, black man. Whatever may have been Messi's motives in addressing Drenthe in this manner, given the astronomical sums received by players like Drenthe, he was hardly your typical poor victim. Moreover, Drenthe must have had his reasons for going to the press 2 years after the incident. On its part, the tabloid must have had its own motives in publicising a racism storm it had itself conjured up out of thin air. There is not a small probability that said motives had to do with attempts to increase sales, but there is more to it. Far from football being rocked by racism, there are a growing number of black players in national football teams. For example, the England squad at the 2010 FIFA World Cup had 8 black players out of 23. That is 34%, a significant rise compared to 20 or 30 years ago, and well above the percentage of blacks in the country's total population. Similarly, in the 2012 European Championship, the Dutch squad had at least 7 non-white players, while the England team in the opening game against France had as many as 6 black players on the pitch out of 11, amounting to over 54%. It follows that the tabloid's imaginary racism storms are nothing but a typical media decoy to deflect attention from the inconvenient truth that non-whites are increasingly overrepresented in football. The creation of bodies like Football Against Racism in Europe, an EU-sponsored international organisation aiming to combat racism and xenophobia through football, exposes a hidden agenda. Bitcoin Mining steps in to say, in Spain, the word Negro is not racist. Considering that from 1994 to 2015, the vice president of the Union of European Football Association, the body which runs European football, was the Turk Cenz Erzik, a former UN operative and banker with links to Adidas and other financial interests, and that half of Britain's Premier League teams are foreign-owned, it's evident that in addition to having become big business instead of sport, organised football is another instrument for the advancement of the international money power's anti-indigenous agenda. In effect, official football is a device for promoting multiracialism, suppressing the indigenous population's ethnic identity and denying it the right to protest and resist, while simultaneously deflecting public attention from what is happening. In short, its true function is that of both instrument and smokescreen for anti-white racism, while at the same time lining the pockets of the money power and its frontmen and collaborators. Race relations and the global charity deception. Charity organisations are a multi-billion pounds industry which wields an enormous amount of influence and power, particularly in respect of race relations. A key representative of this industry is Oxfam. Oxfam is an Oxford-based international confederation of 15 organisations operating in over 90 countries worldwide. The charity was co-founded in 1942 by Gilbert Murray, a friend of Fabian luminaries like George Bernard Shaw and H.G. Wells, and a collaborator of Milnerite General Jan Smuts. Oh, well, I didn't know that Oxfam went back to the Fabians and the Milnerites. I got a lot of books from there, so that's sad to know. Murray was also a proponent of rational world order and president of the Milner-Fabian League of Nations Society. Oxfam, therefore, is a Milner-Fabian operation. Gutted. That's really sad to hear. I spent a lot of money, but I mean, I'd rather have the books. You know, you gotta do what you gotta do to get books. What can I say? Sounding like a book junkie, aren't I? Charities like Oxfam admit that 1 in 5 people in Britain lives in poverty, which is 13 million people, and claim that they are working to support them. However, closer scrutiny of their websites and high street shops across the country reveals an overwhelming concern with African, South Asian, Latin American and other non-British and non-European issues. Oxfam's website reports an amazing reduction in deaths related to childbirth in Mozambique, the rising number of people receiving life-saving treatment for HIV and AIDS and introduction of free healthcare in Zambia, the ability of millions of children in Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya and Malawi to go to school, and the construction of roads in Ethiopia, making it easier for children to go to school, people to reach hospitals, and farmers to transport and sell their crops. All this with money raised in the UK. Charitable donations and foreign aid may make donors feel better about themselves, but is it in the interest of British or European people to aid Africa? As shown by economists like Bauer, foreign aiding increases the power of recipient regimes in relation to the general population, while making them dependent on foreign interests. But there is another reason behind charity and foreign aid projects. Reports published by the Population Division of the UN show that the world's main high fertility regions are Africa, Asia, and Latin America. That is, precisely those regions which charities like Oxfam are over concerned to supply with aid. Africa, in particular, has the highest fertility, and its population is estimated to increase by 150% by 2100. In contrast, Europe is the only region with a declining population, and that is from a BBC News article entitled UN Concerned by World Population Trends, 2011. Clearly, there must be a connection between the activities of charities like Oxfam and foreign aid from Western governments on one hand, and the population explosion in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and other non-European recipients of such aid on the other hand. Equally clear is that the rising population in these regions is the material cause of the unprecedented rise in immigration levels, including refugees and asylum seekers. At the same time, growing numbers of Europeans opt out of having children due to the rising cost of raising them. In other words, Europeans give away money they can ill afford in the current crisis and receive in return immigrants they scarcely need or want. Tellingly, Europe's economists and policymakers representing the international money power consider this arrangement a good thing on the grounds that it, quote, produces a swelling workforce capable of producing more goods and continues economic growth. In the same vein, Peter Sutherland, a leading international banker and head of the UN Forum on Migration and Development, has praised Africa's youth bulge, resulting in millions of Africans heading in the direction of Europe in search of work, as a good thing. Meanwhile, with the exception of white volunteers and campaigners, pictures on the Oxfam website show almost exclusively non-white persons. Among pictures of recipients of philanthropic giving on its philanthropy page, we were unable to find a single white face. This does not necessarily mean that Oxfam provides no aid to whites. What it does show, however, is its predominant preoccupation with aiding non-whites. Oxfam's racial preferences are studiously emulated by members of the establishment who are constantly pictured by the media holding African children in their arms or otherwise busying themselves on that continent or with African issues as if this were their only purpose in life. As with foreign aid initiatives, there is an ulterior motive behind this bizarre behavior. Africa is where the money power extracts gold, diamonds, oil, and other resources which enable it to rule the world. And that goes all the way back to the Rothschilds funding Cecil Rhodes to go down to Africa and take over the diamond mines and the gold mines there, right? Ritualistic, obsessive, and globally broadcast displays of solidarity with Africa's poor serve to cover up the appalling plunder, exploitation, and destruction visited on African countries, while at the same time psychologically preparing Europe's unwitting population for the planned political and economic union with Africa, which will enable the money power to continue to extract resources for its own profit without fear of political upheaval. In turn, this behavior is aped by the white masses who fail to see that it's all a scam devised by the money power to rob not only Africans, but above all Europeans of their money, identity, and freedom. Yeah, that's a really heavy sentence, that last one. Especially this identity bit, right? I mean, money and freedom, that is pretty much stolen off everybody, everywhere, all over the world. But to have your identity stolen, to be told that your culture is just a set of values, right? And there's nothing to do with where you were born and the land that your ancestors inherited, but it's just a case of having some values and believing and saying you believe in something. Very wishy-washy, very vague. That's pretty evil to steal people's identity like that. And I don't think it's just white people who are having their identity stolen. I think this culture, this scientific, technocratic, corporate culture that's everywhere, really, it's stealing identity from all nations, all peoples, and we're losing that rich variety that makes up the tapestry of humanity, with all the different cultures and cuisines and languages and ways of living and spiritual beliefs and practices. All of that is being lost in favor of this. Well, we're probably going to read about it in the next bit, but in favor of this kind of like McDonald's, Starbucks, Netflix, Disney Plus, YouTube, social media, Facebook, Google, Samsung, Apple world that is just everywhere all at once. And the little man, the little business, the little small town, the community, the place where culture that is long-standing and more connected with the ancestry of a given place, these little pockets are being destabilized by having non-native people imported into them. And it really is upsetting to think about it, because it's not just happening, it's just happening all over the place, right? People are being mixed up and mixed together all over the place. And what we are losing, they always talk about on the nature documentaries that, 10 species of animals go extinct every minute or whatever. Whatever the statistic might be. But like, human cultures are going extinct. Human cultures and their ways of living that's what's being lost, and it's being homogenized, standardized, and the scientific control of keeping people aligned with the behaviors that are desirable by the world controllers. These methods are being perfected with all the data that's being gathered, with all the surveillance that's being carried out of every single little thing, your movements, everything you say, everything you search for online, every button you press, every click, every scroll, all of that collected, gathered, and fed into a system which is being used to just flatten out the human species and make us all totally the same everywhere, regardless of skin color, right? That's the bigger thing that's going on. Bitcoin Mining says, a European superculture in the name of diversity, like the 1984 book. War is peace, diversity is unity. Shamanicus says, you'll have to start getting your occult literature from Mencap or the homeless cats charity shops instead. I used to work for Mencap, actually. I had a good time working for them. It was a lot of fun. Frank Lennon says, actuality undermining. I think that's a reference to the resources that are available in Africa that the money powers and elites want to control and have been playing that game for at least 100 years, probably much, much longer. All right, let's continue with the next section. Fair trade, Starbucks and the travel industry. 382, page 382. Another weapon in the money powers covert race war is the Fair Trade Project. Ostensibly aiming to ensure that third world farmers receive a fair price for their produce, fair trade serves to cover up exploitation as well as deflecting attention from the farmers' growing dependence on multinational corporations. Instead of growing food crops to feed themselves and the local communities, as they have done for centuries, they are encouraged to grow alien cash crops such as coffee, cocoa, and tea, which they are compelled to sell at low prices to foreign companies in order to buy often imported food at exorbitant prices, all for the profit of said companies and their associates. In addition, like all projects connected with the Third World, fair trade is used to promote an elite-engineered, multiculturalist and multiracialist agenda, particularly in collaboration with the food service or catering industry. A key player in this scheme has been the coffee shop chain Starbucks. Apart from charging exorbitant prices for its brewed coffee, a non-European beverage of dubious flavour and scant nutritional value made from the charred seeds of the coffee tree which may have harmful health effects, Starbucks is also involved in the music industry, producing a subversive form of musical fusion which it plays in its hundreds of stores around the world as part of Starbucks customers' daily coffee routines. I've never heard about this Starbucks music before. Subversive form of musical fusion. I have to look into that. Starbucks musical fusion. Oh, he's going to tell us more here. The outfit responsible for selecting Starbucks in-store music is Hear Music, an offshoot of Starbucks Entertainment, which promotes artists with inspired, read left-wing, vision. While also promoting a scattering of American country and Irish folk, Hear Music's main concern is black or black-influenced music, African, Afro-American, Afro-Latin American, Afro-European, and Afro-anything, which it promotes in a wide range of related genres, from contemporary jazz to R&B, soul, reggae, and Latin jazz. And notice there's no classical there because classical is too white, apparently. Notable among groups promoted is Zap Mama, whose musical efforts have been described by the New York Times as a utopian multicultural dream. The group's leader, the mixed-race singer Marie Daulnay, believes that her mission is to be a bridge between the European and the African, and bringing the sounds of Africa to the Western world. Given that Europe's music world is already saturated with African and other alien sounds, Starbucks' multicultural dream promises to turn into a nightmare for Europe's indigenous culture, or whatever is left of it. In an apt illustration of Orwell's Fabian socialist Big Brother society, the corporation is expanding its operations to include restaurants, bookstores, and in-flight programs across the globe, so that wherever one goes, one will have the pleasure of listening to the familiar sounds of the money power's universal tunes. This leads us to another key industry contributing to the Orwellian promotion of non-white causes and total neglect, indeed suppression of white interests in the name of diversity. The foreign travel industry owned or controlled by the money power inculcates a false sense that non-European countries, their populations and cultures are preferable to Europe's own. Again, this serves the interests of the international money power, who owns the tourist resorts, airlines, and global chains of hotels, restaurants, coffee shops, food manufacturing companies, and above all, banks, catering for the elite-engineered escapist needs of the travelling or migrating masses. Needless to say, like Oxfam and Starbucks, all of the above, from supermarket to department store chains to banks, operate an Africa project designed to maximize that continent's population explosion and bring about its fusion with Europe. This is where it's really starting to sound like and remind me of Kalergi. Excuse me, need to have a sip there. fusion of Africa with Europe. I think that is a good way to think of Kalergi's plan and what he wrote about the future genetic makeup, let's say, of the people who live in this part of the world. Yeah, well, Ratiu is always one step ahead. He's put this book together in a really fantastic order, you know. It just flows so well, and every section and chapter builds so nicely on what's come before that, yeah, excellent. All right, so this is continuing with the Obama generation, or the Anglo-American establishment and the rise of the mixed race man. The money power's promotion of immigration and non-white culture is accompanied by its equally systematic and pervasive promotion of black and mixed-raced individuals as reflected in fashionable trends like the imposition of racial quotas, adoption of non-white children, and mixed-race marriage in the media, entertainment, and related industries, and exemplified by leading figures of mass culture like Madonna, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, David Bowie, and many others. In a chilling parallel to communist dictatorships where members of the artistic profession routinely promote the leadership's ideological line, a fast-growing number of mass culture representatives in the liberal democratic world allow themselves to be recruited as goodwill ambassadors and special envoys of the UN and used as mouthpieces of its social, political, and racial agendas. At the same time, there has been a relentless campaign among media organisations, including the BBC, to employ more black TV presenters and show hosts. This has been covered by Britain's patriotic press with unreserved approval. The Daily Mail has chosen to style Holly Willoughby, a white female, and Reggie Yates, a black man, who are co-hosting BBC One's singing reality show The Voice, a dream team. As Britain, at the time of writing, is still a white majority country, a combination like the Willoughby Yates team cannot be construed as representative of the British population. The use of the phrase dream team therefore can only have been motivated by an intention to project mixed couples as the desired ideal. The fact is that the behaviour of the media and the entertainment industry is not only a reliable indicator of a society's decadence, it's often emulated by the general public. As observed by media culture theorist Douglas Kellner, media culture shapes our view of the world and our deepest values. Following the media cue, the onstage dream team becomes the offstage couple in the street multiplied by thousands, exactly as intended by the financial and political puppeteers pulling the strings behind the entertainment and media industries, which, as noted earlier, are the money power's instrument of mass propaganda, manipulation and control. Meanwhile, the theme has been taken up by other broadcasters like ITV. Its dating show, Take Me Out, features 3 or 4 male contestants choosing a partner from a group of females. The participants, a large number of whom are tellingly selected from the entertainment industry itself, are often paired with dates from other racial groups, and that's a tactic also deployed by BBC One's Strictly Come Dancing and other shows. Predictably enough, one such mixed-race couple was the first to get married and was duly celebrated by the same media outfits as a great achievement. Objections from the public are routinely treated with derision or vilified as racist. When black Jamaicans expressed displeasure at their fellow Jamaican Usain Bolt's new girlfriend, the Slovakian fashion designer Lubika Slovak, the Daily Mail retaliated by dubbing it abusive and unsporting, while the tabloid stopped short of calling Usain's Jamaican critics Nazis. The message is clear. The elite-imposed miscegenation program is to go ahead, even against the wishes and interests of the black community. A further illustration of the systematic promotion of the mixed couple as an iconic image is the choreographic adaptation of European fairy tales for this purpose. For example, Snow White by Ballet Prel Jocage, shown at London's Sadler's Wells Theatre, whose chairman is economist director Sir David Bell. In May 2012, the performance featured Virginie Corson as Snow White, along black dancer Sergio Diaz as the prince. The same treatment has been applied to the Royal Ballet's Sleeping Beauty, performed by the black Cuban dancer Carlos Acosta as the prince and Tamara Rojo, a white Spaniard, as the princess. The American Ballet Theatre's Sleeping Beauty, again with Acosta as the prince and Susan Jaffe, a white American, as the princess. There are numerous other examples. Nothing in the original stories justifies the choice of a black person for the role in question, this suggests a sinister agenda to distort and deconstruct European culture for the political and financial gain of certain elite groups. It also tallies with the race relation industry's demand that fairies in children's books be depicted in dark colours, that British children who dislike foreign food be treated as racists, etc. While few would object to occasional and spontaneous cases of interracial mixing, it is a very different matter when this is the result of mass indoctrination, manipulation, and conditioning by financial and political interests. The media, entertainment, and advertising industries' systematic construction of the mixed-race couple as an ideal obviously betrays a politically motivated agenda. According to The Independent, mixed-race people are allegedly stronger, while according to the Evening Standard, they are more attractive. This, of course, despite the patent fact that distinct races have been sufficiently strong to thrive on their own for millennia, and that mixed-race people have only become more attractive recently, namely as a result of the global mass media campaign projecting them that way. Yeah, you can't deny it. Like, there's good montages online, kind of like the one that I showed at the start of tonight's stream, where it shows back-to-back advertisements of mixed-race couples. And it's one of those things that once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. I'm thinking of an example. Like, this is a leaflet from the NHS. And, I'll just put it here and show you. There you are. That's a leaflet from the National Health Service in England. It's right in front of me. I had an example sitting there, So it's all over the place. As I mentioned, supermarkets, the examples we just read about here. And once you start to see it, the only conclusion is it's deliberate, because it's to plant that seed into people's minds, and then people emulate it. And because monkey see, monkey do. These are two aspects of mind control and social engineering that really have to be that cannot be emphasized enough. One is monkey see, monkey do, and the other one is repetition, right? Those two things combined will account for the majority of most people's behaviors and the things that they get up and do every day and the way they spend their life, and what they consider to be quote unquote normal. Is because of repetition, and then people just copying and emulating what they see on a day-to-day basis or what they hear on a day-to-day basis, and that's how it's done. And every personality type has a different group for them to fall into, whether it's left-leaning or right-leaning, whether it's nationalist or internationalist. There's a little group there waiting for you that's been designed in such a way as to appeal to you, so you'll fall into that. And and you're never likely to actually get to the bottom of what's going on in the world because of this, right? There's these deep grooves or tracks laid out for you to fall into and move along, and never be any other wiser that your life has been designed by somebody else. And getting up and drinking a cup of coffee every day is not something that you have made a conscious choice to do. I mean, I do that. I'm not criticizing anyone who gets up and drinks coffee first thing in the morning. What I'm saying is that somebody else somewhere designed that and decided to make that a thing that everyone does first thing in the morning. So it's not like, I'm just wait till my energy is a bit low and then I'll go and get the coffee. On the odd occasion that my energy's low and I need a boost because I can't have a nap, and just use it as and when. It's like we're going to condition people into making that thing the thing they do every single day, because that way we sell more coffee. And that just applies to pretty much every single aspect of your life. You wouldn't believe it. Anyway, back to the book. We're here, aren't we? The logical implication of all this is that non-mixed people, particularly whites, are weaker and less attractive and therefore inferior. This tallies with new claims about descendants of African slaves having a superior athletic gene, and with a study by Cardiff University claiming that mixed-race people are not only more attractive but also more successful, a claim the authors of the study have sought to support using Darwin's theory that crossbreeding leads to genetically superior offspring. Not only do such claims blatantly contradict the establishment mantra "we are all equal," but, as pointed out by the Daily Mail, such claims were redolent of the racial superiority theories of the 1930s. Thus, there is a subtle yet undeniable shift in mainstream race discourse from racial equality towards racial superiority. Very excellent paragraph there, and really analysing why this is all such stupid nonsense. But a great summary of what's happening and why people should not fall for it. Such racist assumptions are finding wider amplification through media and entertainment policies at European level. For example, in 2009, the mixed race singer Jay Dyer, who has a British-Italian father and a Jamaican mother, was elected to represent Britain at the Eurovision Song Contest. While Ioan's vocal abilities are beyond dispute, it remains unclear why she was given preference over candidates who were more representative of Britain's general population, which, after all, is what the contest should be about. When Ioan finished in 5th place, her promoter blamed it on racism in the contest. Of course he did. While it cannot be proven that Ioan's failure was due to racism, expecting a contestant to win on grounds of race is itself racist. And it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because if the black people, if the non-white people don't do very well, it's because of racism. And there's no way to remove that from the conversation when you start thinking like this in terms of like racial groups. It's very hard to deprogram yourself and not think in these terms and go back to to thinking in terms of the individual. And this is all focusing on the group level, right? And that is just a recipe for disaster, because that's the group. It's the black and white checkerboard. It's the two opposing armies going to war. It's the Masonic checkerboard. It's the chessboard. It's a classic dialectic to just have two groups of people: the in-group, the out-group, the us and the them. And yet at the same time, there's all these like trace your heritage services, and they'll tell you that you're a mix of all types of different things, and that everyone's a mongrel, pretty much. I don't know if that stuff's just made up when they give you those percentages back. But it's all like contradictory and illogical, and groups. The level of the group is not the best way to think about this, because what is really under attack is the individual, and the solution to all this is the individual. And understanding your own individual abilities, skills, aptitudes, passions, strengths, and doing your utmost to bring those to bear in the world positively for the benefit of the people around you and in your community and on your street and so on. So don't fall for the us versus them kind of mentality, even though everything he's describing is on point and it is happening and it is being done. The wrong response is to say, right, white people, let's all get together and kick out the non-whites. Like, that is that could very easily be the plan, right? And I thought that might be the riots that happened towards the back end of last year might be the spark, because there's a lot of dry tinder lying around, and I thought those riots might be the spark that kick off some sort of racial-based civil war, right? And I think that's still on my bingo card as one of the things that they could try and roll out. But it's just very important to be careful about not falling into that sort of what I think is a divide and conquer tactic and trap. But what we got? Some comments here. Let's read these. Frank's in the chat suggesting that the Kalergi book may be the next one to read on the channel. It might be. I'm not sure if it has a disclaimer at the front preventing people from reading it and broadcasting it, but I'll have a look. Frank says, remember the go to work on an egg campaign. Propaganda brainwashing to get people to eat eggs for breakfast, right? Frank says, I wonder if it's racism to run in a marathon. Oh, very good question. I don't know. Bitcoin Mining says, the atomization of reality promotes a need for collectivism, and the ether promotes the need for individualization. A paradox of ideals. But I think all paradoxes can be resolved, can't they? I don't know. But yeah, we've been like fractured and separated and split apart from each other on so many different levels. The mind boggles trying to even conceive of how those rifts might be healed. It really does. It's a Herculean task that we have ahead of us, those of us who want to do something about it, you know. Where did we get up to? Here. Meanwhile, so continuing about the Eurovision Song Contest. Meanwhile, it may be pointed out that the Eurovision Song Contest has a tradition of favouring so-called black and minority ethnic groups. In 2012, out of the 24 contesting countries, 5 were represented by members of the following minorities: Congolese, Indonesian, Iranian, Jewish, and Moroccan. This amounts to an astonishing over 20% minority and over 16% non-white representation. That is well beyond European average. It is clear from the contestants' profile that this is not accidental. Norway's Iranian representative had been promoted by MTV Norway, an offshoot of MTV US. Ukraine's Congolese representative performed at Barack Obama's presidential inauguration in 2009. France's Indonesian representative was Goodwill Ambassador of the UN in 2009 and participated in a 2011 concert promoting racial diversity organized by SOS Racisme, an outfit described as a puppet of France's Socialist Party. Significantly, the European Broadcasting Union, which controls the Eurovision Song Contest, has several US associate members, including the Rockefeller Associated Media Corporation Time Warner. The latter's involvement may help explain why the 2012 contest was won by Sweden's Moroccan representative, Angun, with a psychedelic performance of the trance song Euphoria. The song is part of an album released earlier in the year by Warner Music Sweden, which is part of the Time Warner spin-off Warner Music Group. From 1967 to 2004, Time Warner owned WMG, whose subsidiaries are among America's largest recording corporations specializing in African American music. For example, Atlantic Records has been promoting jazz, R&B and soul, while Interscope Records has been promoting rap and violent hip-hop. When WMG was sold in 2004, the sale agreement included a provision allowing Time Warner to buy back 15% of the new company. This would suggest that despite the sale, Time Warner retained some form of control in WMG, in which case the latter remains part of Time Warner's global media and entertainment empire for all practical purposes. In any case, WMG is officially owned by Access Industries, whose founder is the Russian-American billionaire Len Blavatnik, who is a partner of prominent Anglo-American establishment member Nat Rothschild in the aluminium giant Rusal. In addition, a number of WMG executives have been with the company since the early 1990s, and its chairman from 2004 to 2012 was Lyer Cohen, former head of the hip-hop and rap outfit Island Def Jam. Apart from the undeniable links to international financial interests and subversive music genres, one must wonder as to what might have been the message of Angun's bizarre performance. Was it intended to convey the euphoria experienced by the rising members of Moroccans, who are now free to live in Europe thanks to EU legislation? Or was it, to paraphrase Four, symbolic of the holy exaltation felt by the high priests of the New World Order enacting the sacrificial deconstruction of Western civilization. In any case, while Warner and its Eurovision puppets were preparing the Requiem, or Dance of Death, for European culture, the American People magazine named the mixed-race singer Beyoncé the most beautiful woman in the world. Right then. Again, as it is unclear why the other candidates in the magazine top 10 list did not qualify for the title, it can only be surmised that a politically motivated racial agenda was at play. Indeed, People is published by Time Inc., a subsidiary of Time Warner, whose former chairman and executive officer Richard Parsons is a longtime protege of Nelson Rockefeller and trustee of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. Unsurprisingly, therefore, we find that the most militant promotion of the new mixed-race man, or what Britain's Equality Commission has called the Obama generation, emanates from left-wing America. It is not mere accident that the New York logo, the unofficial seal of the New World Order, has become a compulsory fashion accessory throughout the Western world. America's New York-led media and entertainment industries have systematically promoted interracial relations for decades. Cinematographic examples of this genre include 2 Days in New York, starring Julie Delpy and Chris Rock. We need not go far to discover who is behind such artistic masterpieces. 2 Days in New York was released by Magnolia Pictures, the same film studio which financed the anti-American Iraq War film Redacted. Its co-owner, Todd Wagner, is a trustee of the American Film Institute, which was set up with funds from the Rockefeller-associated Ford Foundation. Already in the 1930s, the Rockefellers' endowments empire was one of the chief instigators of the film industry as an instrument of mass propaganda, manipulation, and control, which it operated through Rockefeller-funded outfits like the General Education Board and the American Film Center. Indeed, the Rockefellers have a long history of support for non-white interests going back to John D. Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil himself. Due to his ruthless business practices, John D. Rockefeller was one of the most hated men of the time. To improve his image, he supplemented his business activities with philanthropic projects, one of the first of which was funding the Spelman College for African American women. His son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., followed a similar career. Notably, he was a disciple and financial supporter of John Dewey, a president of the Fabian Socialist League for Industrial Democracy, which the London Fabian Society described as one of our provincial societies. In 1918, Jay Dyer Jr. co-founded the experimental Lincoln School of New York, which was run according to Deweyan teachings, indoctrinating the offspring of America's wealthy classes with a sense of personal guilt for the world's ills and a duty to actively participate in the construction of a new and better society on Fabian socialist lines. Being funded by the Rockefellers' General Education Board, operated by the Fabian Socialist-dominated School of Education at Rockefeller-founded Columbia University, according to the teachings of Rockefeller-supported Fabian Socialist Dewey, and staffed with Fabian Socialist teachers from the Rockefeller-funded Teachers College, the Lincoln School was as thoroughly a Fabian Socialist institution as it was a Rockefellerian one. The close ideological and financial interconnections between Fabian Socialist and Rockefeller interests also show why, for all practical purposes, Fabian Socialism and Rockefellerism, aka Rockefeller Republicanism, are indistinguishable from each other. In the 1920s, JDR Jr. had 4 of his sons, Nelson, Winthrop, Lawrence, and David, indoctrinated at the Lincoln School near Harlem. This also explains the psychological urge of the Rockefeller clan to support Fabian socialism and its projects. For the Rockefellers, Fabian socialism including unreserved and unexamined support for non-white causes, has become a kind of religious mania. While setting up their Fabian-inspired educational institutions, the same banking and industrial interests set up the Commission on Interracial Cooperation, among whose leaders was George Foster Peabody, Deputy Chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Director of the Rockefeller's General Education Board, and trustee of various organizations promoting African American education like the Tuskegee and Hampton Institutes. One of Peabody's more eccentric feats was supporting the promotion of Negro spiritual songs in U.S. Army camps and organizing a European tour of the Black Hampton Choir to arouse the British public. His Commission on Interracial Cooperation received grants from the Laura Spelman Rockefeller Memorial, along with well-known subversive organizations like the London School of Economics and the Institute of Pacific Relations. Other organizations through which the Rockefeller Foundation and the Laura Spelman Rockefeller Memorial, later reincarnated as the Spelman Fund of New York, promoted interracial relations and education along with African American culture, included the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, and a string of associated black colleges and universities. This already impressive network of organizations acquired a further international dimension through various interlocking outfits like the International Institute of Teachers College, the Institute of International Education of New York, and the League of Nations International Institute of Intellectual Cooperation, aka International Committee on Intellectual Cooperation, of Paris, which operated in close collaboration with the International Institute of Educational Cinematography of Rome. That's a lot of international institutions. This network soon became global, both at official level, the work of some of these organizations being taken over by the UNESCO, which is controlled by the same interests. And unofficially, through private outfits like the Synergos Institute, which is run by the Rockefellers, David and his daughter Peggy Dulaney themselves. The Rockefellers' European counterparts, the Rothschilds themselves, were no strangers to the systematic promotion of black causes. Lord Victor Rothschild, the Labour peer in the House of Lords, was a jazz enthusiast who introduced his sister Kathleen Panonica de Koningsworte to the genre. The Jazz Baroness, as Nika came to be known, left England for New York, where she not only became a leading promoter of African American music, civil rights, and feminism in the 1950s and 60s, but went further than most white millionaire philanthropists, becoming romantically involved with black American pianist Thelonious Monk. Yeah, I had read that in Mark Devlin's book, the musical trilogy, the musical Truth trilogy, 1, 2, and 3. There they are, the musical Truth books, 1, 2, and 3. That's the first place where I saw that tidbit that Rothschild was married to jazz pianist Thelonious Monk, which I was pretty sad about because I really liked Thelonious Monk. He had some great tunes, but it was kind of dissonant sort of jazz. You know, it was the kind of music that is catchy and upbeat, but he also it's kind of like provocative as well. And it wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea, I wouldn't say. Quite dissonant in places, but it's interesting to see that backed up again because I couldn't find any reference in Mark's book or online. I couldn't find much reference to validate that. So interesting to see it again. Apparently it's from The Secret Life of Jazz Baroness. It's from a Times story and also a BBC 4, I suppose, documentary. So the BBC reporting that. Anyway, continuing. We may observe that Rothschild women continue to lead by example. As noted earlier, Emma Rothschild is married to the leftist Indian economist Amartya Sen, while Kate Rothschild, married to Ben Goldsmith, has been involved with African-American hip-hop singer Jay Electronica, who is believed to be a member of the black activist organization 5% Nation, which was set up by elements with links to the Nation of Islam. That's from the Daily Telegraph. To the same elite circle have also belonged Ben Goldsmith's sister Jemima, who married the Pakistani cricketer Imran Khan, her friend, the late Princess Diana, who was involved with various men of Pakistani and Middle Eastern origin, and a son, Prince Harry, involved with mixed-race US actress Meghan Markle. This type of behaviour on the part of members of the same social group cannot be mere coincidence, nor can it be unconnected with the money power's systematic promotion of the mixed-race couple as a desired ideal. In addition to representing the aberrant actions of a dysfunctional and culturally disoriented elite, such behaviour is clearly politically motivated. Together with other factors such as Prince Charles's systematic promotion of Islam and rap music, it demonstrates the establishment's determination to play a leading role in the deliberate deconstruction of European society, its culture, and civilization. It also shows that what was once the behaviour of left-wing fringe activists is now becoming an elite-imposed cultural norm. Another supporter of African-American causes was the Scottish-born steel tycoon Andrew Carnegie, who, like the Rockefellers and Lord Victor Rothschild, was an admirer of socialism and author of books like Problems of Today, Wealth, Labour, Socialism, in which he disparaged wealth and millionaires. Significantly, there appears to be a close ideological connection between Carnegie and Fabian Society leader Bernard Shaw. In 1886, Shaw published the essay Socialism for Millionaires, in which he wrote that money is worth nothing to the man who has more than enough, advising the wealthy to spend their money on social, i.e. Fabian, projects. According to Shaw, his essay started a millionaire movement, inspiring Carnegie to declare that no man should die rich. It may be noted that Lord Rothschild made similar pronouncements. At any rate, Carnegie funded the National Negro Business League, as well as being a major donor to the Tuskegee Institute and similar causes. Among other organizations promoting African American causes that can be linked with both Fabian socialism and the money power is the National Negro Committee, later National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was America's first civil rights organization. It was set up in 1909 by Fabian socialists like William English Walling of the American Fabian League and the African-American W.E.B. Du Bois, who later joined the Fabian Intercollegiate Socialist Society. The Rockefellers CFR has been strongly represented in the NAACP. Last but not least, there were more militant initiatives like South Africa's Black Consciousness Movement, which was supported by the Anglican Church, an offshoot of the Fabian-dominated Church of England, which was a founding member of the Rockefeller-funded Christian Socialist World Council of Churches, and corporate members of the Anglo-American establishment. Key sponsors of these militant currents in America were agencies of the Anglo-American establishment, such as the left-wing Ford Foundation, I thought it was going to be a list there, it wasn't. And then there's a lot of references. It says, for the socialist credentials of Henry Ford and his foundation, see Sutton, Smoot, Martin, and for the foundation's support of radical pro-black, pro-immigrant and other left-wing causes, see Rooks, Lengel, Horowitz and Laxin. Significantly, while supporting black liberation movements, the Rockefellers' Chase Manhattan Bank in the 1970s and 80s led a move by major US banks, followed by the IMF and European banks, to stop loans to South Africa's public and private sectors. This facilitated the fall of the white government and the takeover of the country by the Black African National Congress Party, a socialist organization armed by the Soviet Union and backed by the Fabian Society, the Astors, and the Baileys. The promotion of interracial and intercultural relations in favour of the black minority may have seemed a worthy endeavour in the early 1900s, when blacks were exposed to widespread discrimination. The problem is that, as with other philanthropic or humanitarian projects of the international money power, its true purpose was to increase the money power's own wealth, influence, and power, while simultaneously covering up its agenda of world domination and providing it with a veneer of false respectability and benignancy. Not sure about that one. Benignancy. From inception, the promotion of black causes served to provide the money power with a ready supply of efficient workers and loyal servicemen. Hence, for example, the promotion of Negro spiritual songs in US Army camps. Similarly, the money power's later promotion of non-whites at the expense of whites has served and continues to serve as a cynical smokescreen for the predatory activities of Anglo-American corporations in Africa and elsewhere, where, in close collaboration with black local leaders, they extract natural resources for their own profit while imposing a life of poverty, dictatorship and slavery on the native populations, as may be seen from the experiences of South Africa. White rule is being replaced with black socialist dictatorships backed by multinational corporations, a clear reflection of mankind's Fabian-designed future. Another problem is that the world has moved on. Since the 2009 installation of Barack Obama as President of the United States, arguably the most powerful political leader in the world, blacks in the Western world can no longer be said to represent an oppressed minority. In fact, in countries like Brazil, where blacks amount to half the total population, blacks no longer are a minority at all. And the same applies to many Western cities, especially in America, where in 22 large cities, minorities make up the majority. Well, and that's from Time. That's from an article in the Time entitled 5 Most Surprising Findings from the 2010 Census. And increasingly also in Europe, Amsterdam, London, Paris, etc. Moreover, whites are not being promoted in black majority countries in the same way as blacks are promoted in white majority ones. There are no quotas for whites in African governments or state organizations. Groups representing the human rights of whites, to the extent that they exist at all, do not wield the same degree of power and influence as comparable non-white groups do in Europe. Nor is there mass immigration of Europeans into Africa. It follows that interracial relations remain biased towards black populations everywhere, and there is no sign of attempts to redress this trend. A more sinister aspect of the problem is that militant movements like South Africa's BCM and America's Black Power have spawned organizations which are not only pro-black, but positively anti-Western and anti-white. Nor are anti-white attitudes restricted to the militant currents within the movement. As in Britain, there is mounting evidence that America's use of interracial relations for political purposes is snowballing out of proportion and out of control. Through its education, media, and related industries, the money power has come to increasingly project black and mixed-race individuals as intellectually, morally, or physically superior to their white counterparts. In the film industry, this has its roots in a new, enormously influential genre which emerged in the early 70s. Known as blaxploitation, it was based on the militant rhetoric of the Black Power and Black Studies movements. Early examples were Sweetback's Badass Song and Shaft. Oh, that's two different ones. So early examples were Sweetback's Badass Song and Shaft, telling the story of a black man striking back at representatives of white authority. The theme tune to Shaft is pretty good though, isn't it? Catchy tune. To better understand the nature of this genre, we only need to follow the career of the black actor Denzel Washington, one of America's leading film stars. In 1975, Edward Zwick, a white Chicagoan Harvard graduate and recipient of a Rockefeller Fellowship, became a directing fellow of the Ford Rockefeller-funded American Film Institute. Following the blaxploitation pattern, Zwick in 1989 directed the film Glory, about a black regiment in the American Civil War, in which Denzel Washington played Trip, an escaped slave who joined the North's Union forces against the South's Confederates. In 1996, Zwick directed Courage Under Fire, again starring Denzel Washington as Lieutenant Colonel. Serling, who was tasked with finding the truth behind a covered-up incident during the Gulf War, in effect acting as a sort of conscience to society. Predictably enough, Washington later starred in the apocalyptic film The Book of Eli, in which he played a wandering black prophet battling a dictatorial white leader. It may be added that Zwick belongs to a class of film directors who like to cast whites in a negative light, while Denzel Washington's favourite hero is the black supremacist leader Malcolm X, whom he played in a film of that title, distributed by Time Warner subsidiary Warner Brothers. And it reminds me also of the much more recent film Get Out, where there's an interracial couple, and go and watch it. It's crazy, but you'll see what I mean. After reading this chapter, go and just read the summary of Get Out, or go onto YouTube and just find a video that explains the plot in 10 minutes or so. It's a classic example of what he's talking about here. The toxic implications of all this come to light when we consider that Malcolm X was the spokesman for the Nation of Islam, an African-American organization teaching that whites are devils and reportedly advising its followers to ritually kill whites, usually through beheading, the murder of I didn't know. That's crazy. Is that right? The murder of British soldier Lee Rigby by black Muslims and similar incidents elsewhere show that this form of crime against white people is spreading to other parts of the world. On balance, it is evident that we are dealing with a subtle, yet systematic and pervasive form of propaganda conducted by operatives of the white money powers entertainment industry, in which the construction of black or mixed race individuals as morally superior characters is skillfully combined with criticism of white society and in particular of white leadership. It follows that the election of the mixed-race Barack Obama as President of the United States, with the assistance of the same progressive elites and their financial backers, cannot be unconnected with the systematic propaganda that went before it. Indeed, while the Republican Rockefellers had quietly prepared the ground from behind the scenes, it was the Democrat Bill Clinton who, in the early 1990s, officially promised an administration that looked like America. That is, like America's Fabian socialist-engineered multiracial society. Of particular interest is that in the very first year of Clinton's presidency, the US weekly magazine Time published a special issue featuring a front-page computer image of the projected new mixed-race American. What? Which can only be described as promotional literature for multiculturalism and multiracialism. Time is published by Time Inc., which also publishes People and is a part of Time Warner. The latter is not only the largest media corporation in the world, but is controlled by the Anglo-American establishment. Time magazine itself was founded by Morgan Rockefeller interests, and like The Economist in Britain, is an organ of the Anglo-American money power. For example, the chief editor of Time Inc. from 1964 to 1979 was Hedley W. Donovan, a Rhodes Scholar, surprise, surprise, trustee of the Ford and Carnegie Foundations, surprise, surprise, as well as CFR and Trilateral Commission member. So that is the full bingo card. Hedley W. Donovan. President Clinton himself was a fellow Rhodes Scholar and Trilateral Commission member. His wife, Hillary, was a disciple of radical left-winger Saul Alinsky, who taught his followers how to seize political power through a small core of disciplined activists and wrote a sympathetic thesis on him. Unsurprisingly, Hillary has become one of the key figures who control the Democratic Party both directly. She became chairwoman of the Senate Democratic Steering and Coordination Committee in 2003, and indirectly through her Political Action Committee, which funds political allies. Another instrument of control is a network of independent fundraising groups controlled by Hillary's ally, the left-wing radical plutocrat and long-time Rothschild collaborator, George Soros. Like his Rockefeller and other associates, Democratic financier and activist Soros has a long history of backing non-white causes, from financing black students in South Africa to bankrolling pro-immigration groups in America, and pro-immigration and pro-African groups in Europe, such as the Oxford Martin School. Excuse me. Not unexpectedly, Therefore, having given more than $20 million to Democratic groups in 2004, he also spearheaded Wall Street support for presidential candidate Barack Obama. The latter had moved to Chicago in the early 1980s, when that city was run by its first African-American mayor, and like Clinton, became a faithful disciple of Alinsky, as well as having Communist Party member Frank Marshall Davis as political mentor. Obama became involved with the Developing Communities Project, an Alinsky outfit funded by liberal elements of Chicago's Catholic Church, and with the Gamaliel Foundation, an umbrella for Alinskyan organizations which works in close collaboration with the African American Leadership Commission. Obama was also a lecturer at the Rockefeller-created Chicago University and significantly a self-confessed Marxist. In 2007 and 2008, Soros openly declared his preference for Obama and the radical change he would bring, in the New York Times, twice. Apart from Soros, there have been Wall Street figures among Obama's backers whose financial institutions the reader will identify as familiar members of the Anglo-American establishment. In 2012, one of these was Antonio Weiss, global head of investment banking at Lazard, with senior Lazard advisors like the Fabian socialist Peter Mandelson. This is not in the least surprising. Moreover, the Rockefellers themselves were indirectly linked with Barack Obama through associated interests like Soros, whose Tides outfits they were funding, and in particular the banking company Goldman Sachs. In 2003, Thomas Healy, a retired partner of Goldman Sachs & Co., became a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation and chairman of its investment committee. Co-chairman of Goldman Sachs, John Corzine, a left-wing Democrat, was involved in the recruitment of Obama and in fundraising for Obama's Democratic Party. Goldman Sachs executives reportedly sent Obama sums of money exceeding those of all other companies. More directly, Rockefeller interests were linked to Obama through a number of key figures with whom he surrounded himself before and after the election, such as Jamie Dimon, William Daley, and James Crown of JP Morgan, and Robert Rubin of Citigroup, all staunch supporters of the Democrats. Obama also received a substantial share of financial backing from members of the Rothschild clan. That was New York Times article called Change on the 11th of November, 2008. In short, not only does the money power's massive support for the left-wing Obama expose its political preferences, Obama's electoral campaign raised $778 million as opposed to the Republicans' $383 million, but his election in 2008 marked a dramatic turn to the left, which the money power's Trilateral Commission hailed as a great leap forward. That is quite interesting, isn't it, that the left would generate more funding than the right, when you kind of often hear that like the right is more associated with capitalism and business owners and greedy people and rich people. Well, how do you explain 778 million versus 383 million then? Hard to explain, isn't it? In those simplistic left versus right dialectical terms. To their credit, critics of Obama launched various initiatives, such as Restore Our Future, a political action committee set up in 2010 in support of Republican candidate Mitt Romney. The Political Action Committee has enjoyed the financial support of prominent individuals and corporations from Bob Perry, John Paulson, and Sheldon Adelson to Sun Capital Advisor and Continental Resources. This clearly shows that financial interests are not all backing the designs of the Anglo-American money power. True, among Republican supporters there may be individuals with business links to the interests backing the Democrats, but it should not be impossible for such individuals to separate politics from business interests. The main point is that financial support for the opposition can easily be organized when there is a will to do so, as shown by the successful presidential campaign of real estate magnate Donald Trump in 2016. Whether the opposition realizes the extent to which the Milner-Fabian conspiracy dominates American society, or Whether it can organise itself in time to make a difference is another matter. What is certain is that, in view of what is at stake, the wealthy right's involvement in political activism has become a long-term political imperative, as well as a moral and religious obligation. Meanwhile, left-wing community organisers like Obama, Clinton and their followers remain resourceful adversaries. In a bid to win immigrant votes, Obama in 2012 announced an executive action, DREAM Act, allowing more than 800,000 illegal immigrants to remain and work in the country. With 12 million illegal immigrants already living in the US, it's easy to see through Obama's ruse. Similarly, with immigrant as well as liberal votes in mind, Hillary Clinton in 2013 called for an open borders policy. While critics have condemned such tactics as undemocratic and illegal, they have been cheered by immigrant leaders. As in Britain and other European countries, immigration in America is being promoted as a means of creating a pool of loyal supporters for left-wing elites and their subversive programs. Thus, not only Western economies, but also Western political systems have been made dependent on immigration. This provides further supporting evidence for our contention that Western society is becoming a society ruled by immigrants for immigrants. It is a contention confirmed with approval by the money power itself, whose mouthpiece, the Time magazine, proudly announced that, quote, "Our countries have been transforming themselves into immigrant societies." The fact is that our countries have not been transforming themselves, but have been transformed into immigrant societies by the money power and its political lackeys against the will and interests of the majority population. That's backed up by what Keir Starmer said, at least. It was policy and it's an experiment. Statements like the above not only expose the money power's duplicity, but also reveal its true colours, clearly showing whose side it has chosen to take. The same Time article calls for America to expand massively. The number of immigrants with skills it allegedly needs, ominously hailing America as a universal nation in the making. In light of these facts, a clear, money-driven pattern emerges, which shows that these developments are by no means the result of chance, and even less of democratic processes, but of behind-the-scenes machinations by undemocratic elites with a warped sense of philanthropy and a pathological obsession with social engineering and world rule for the public good. It is a pattern with well-documented financial and ideological roots. Fabian mastermind Bernard Shaw, himself a leading light in the fields of media, entertainment and propaganda, and close friend of money interests like the Astors, who had close links to the Morgan and Rockefeller groups, was one of the first to advocate the fusion of the races, declaring in the 1930s, quote, "I believe in fusion. The more fusion, the better," and emphasizing that the future belonged to the mongrel, mixed-race man, not to the white man. Like his ideological successors, Shaw did not stop at theory. He made practical proposals such as the introduction of collective farms, which would operate like a sort of open-air university and contribute to the mixing of the races. The Fabian, that sounds like it might, an open-air farm, like a kibbutz maybe. The Fabian leaders' proposals explain why, throughout the Western world, universities have become not only immigration and miscegenation factories, but also nuclei of anti-white agitation. It was in the womb of these universities, inseminated with socialist ideas and nourished by the self-serving largesse of philanthropic and humanist billionaires and their foundations, that the black consciousness, black liberation, and black power movements were born. Then as now, the unspoken implication was that the white race was to have no future, a proposition clearly echoed by Times, the new face of America, the Independent's The Future of Society is Mixed, the Daily Mail's Reggie's The Voice of the Future, etc. The construction of black and mixed race individuals as stronger and more attractive than white people leads to the same implications and the same results. Those who aim for what is superior and desirable also aim to eliminate what is inferior and undesirable. Thus, The idealization and idolization of the black and mixed races goes hand in hand with a marked phobia of the white race. These two interdependent and mutually reinforcing tendencies must be identified as the primary symptoms of the collective psychopathology caused by Milner-Fabian ideology in Western societies. The result of this condition is that we are currently witnessing what the observer has described as the last days of the white world. The objective consideration of the available evidence enables us to trace the origins of these developments to the Fabian-instigated and billionaire-funded New Age, counterculture and student revolution projects, which culminated in the black movements mentioned above. In April 1969, the Detroit Interreligious Foundation for Community Organization convened a conference on interracial relations called Black Economic Development Conference. IFCO commissioned the black Marxist activist and community organizer James Forman of Chicago to write a report on the issues under discussion. Forman produced a document entitled The Black Manifesto, demanding $500 million in reparations and stating, "To win our demands, we will have to declare war on the white Christian churches and Jewish synagogues." In May, Forman read his manifesto in the Rockefeller-sponsored Riverside Church of New York, declaring, "Our fight is against racism, capitalism, and imperialism, and we are dedicated to building a socialist society inside the U.S., where the total means of production and distribution are in the hands of the state, and that must be led by black people." Forman's document allegedly sparked outrage among America's white supporters of black causes. However, students of the Rockefeller-associated National Council of Churches had been among the financial supporters of the Detroit conference that generated the document. And in 1973, IFCO leader Lucius Walker, who had organized the conference, was appointed Associate General Secretary of NCC. Moreover, as detailed above, the money power continued to act in the spirit of Forman's declaration, engineering only 4 decades later the election of Barack Obama as President of the United States. What is more, Barack Obama is the son of a Muslim from Kenya of the same name. The name Barack itself is an Arab and Muslim name. These facts cannot be unconnected with the Rockefellers' interreligious and interracial brand of religion as sponsored by their Riverside Church and associated outfits. In addition to promoting African American interests, the Rockefeller Group also promotes Latin American causes represented by organizations like the National Council of La Raza. Modeled on the NAACP, La Raza was set up in the 1960s by operatives of the Rockefeller-controlled Ford Foundation and is funded by Ford Rockefeller Soros interests and associates like the Gates Foundation. La Raza has been linked with radical organizations pursuing a hidden agenda to reconquer the US for Latin Americans, especially Mexicans. In 2011, 2 years after Obama's assumption of power, the US National Research Agency PolicyLink produced a map of America's tomorrow, showing that by 2042, white people will be a minority in America. PolicyLink's African-American founder and CEO Angela Glover Blackwell wrote, quote, "As a nation, we can see our future, and it is captured in the hopes of a 5-year-old Latina girl and a 7-year-old African-American boy." Blackwell is a former senior vice president at the Rockefeller Foundation. Meanwhile, surprise, surprise, Rockefeller. Of course she is. Meanwhile, the Synergos Institute, a key outfit in the Rockefellers' international endowment empire and parent organization of the exclusive global philanthropist circle, claims to be, quote, "working to create a more just and equitable global society in which all individuals, families, and communities have a meaningful opportunity to improve the quality of their lives for themselves and future generations." Given that the same sources are proudly announcing that the future belongs to Latinos and African Americans, this obviously excludes white individuals, families, and communities. The left's hope not hate slogan stands exposed as a lie when whites have no future and therefore no hope. The Rockefeller-inspired belief that America's future belongs exclusively to Latinos and blacks is paralleled by its Rothschild-dominated European counterpart to the effect that the future belongs to non-white immigrants. Ian Goldin, former principal economist with the Rothschilds EBRD and currently head of the influential Oxford Martin School, a massive Soros-funded operation involving hundreds of Oxford academics, whose advisory council includes Rothschild and Soros associates like Amartya Sen, Joseph Stiglitz, and Nicholas Stern, believes that we all should overcome the thought that we are purebred Europeans and think of ourselves as Africans. Thus, while there is no doubt that movements aiming to impose white supremacy, such as National Socialism, have existed in the past, the present activities of non-white supremacist currents, notably initiated and led by elements of the Anglo-American Milner-Fabian establishment, cannot be denied or ignored. They must be strongly condemned and combated by the international community and particularly by the UN, EU, and other international organizations. Finally, like its other pet slogan, "We are all equal," the left's claim, "We are all Africans," based on the disputed out of Africa theory, must be exposed as blatantly contradicting its own preferential treatment of non-whites, institutionalization of miscegenation, and other entrenched tactics in its repertoire. If all humans are equal, why insist that mixed-raced people are stronger, more attractive, and more successful than others? This self-contradiction also removes the basis of the left's traditional opposition to past European colonization of Africa and other non-white territories. If all races are equal and all humans are African, why object to colonization? Were not white colonists as much at home in Africa, where they supposedly came from, as the native Africans? Likewise, if the colonization of America by Europeans was wrong, why is it right to now colonize it with Asians and blacks? This is really getting to the key contradiction in all this stuff. Either colonization is bad and we object to all forms of it, or colonization is good and there is no objection to it. The left's objection to some forms of colonization, i.e. by whites, and simultaneous promotion of others, i.e. by non-whites, exposes its entire ideological system as a sham designed to enforce world domination by the self-serving international money interests behind it. All right. We got 3 pages and a bit. I'm just going to have a sip before we finish this off. Sorry, I should mute myself when I sip. I'm sure people don't want to listen to the sound of that. All right. We're in the home stretch now. In sum, the aim of the money power and its instruments of indoctrination, propaganda, manipulation, and control, the political establishment and associated race relations, media, entertainment, and advertising industries, is to institutionalize mass immigration and miscegenation with a view to establishing a mixed race, i.e. non-white, global population as a means of imposing world government. This anti-white counterculture, which has infiltrated the whole of the Western world, is the deliberate creation of a cult-like movement that believes in the self-sacrifice of the white race, its culture, and civilization on the altar of globalism and world rule. Well, in a nutshell, that's it. That's it. I think he's just that's his main thesis right there in that one paragraph. It only took us 404 pages to get there. Okay, solutions next. What can be done to prevent the extinction of Europe's indigenous population? In its May-June 2012 issue, the CFR journal Foreign Affairs belatedly acknowledged the Western world's population crisis. While highlighting the demographic decline in European countries like Austria, Germany, and Russia, it also disingenuously claimed that the United States fertility rate is about the replacement level. The fact is that while the fertility rate for the total population may be at replacement level, this is not so in the white population, as indicated by the data given above. America's white population will be a small minority within a few decades, and from there to extinction, it is not far. Similar predictions have been made for Europe and Britain. The Observer published The Last Days of a White World in 2000. As the homeland of the European race, Europe is particularly important for the survival of white people. In consequence, measures to ensure that Europe can continue to provide a home for future generations of indigenous Europeans must urgently be taken. Hang on a sec. Okay. In light of the undeniable parallels between the historical European colonization of other continents and the current colonization of Europe by non-Europeans, it is pertinent to point out some aims and methods of the various anti-colonial movements. For example, in India, these were 1. Self-government, 2. Promotion of indigenous self-interests, in particular economic self-sufficiency, 3. Cultural, religious, and political education, aiming to make the indigenous population conscious of its spiritual and cultural heritage and expose the anti-indigenous character of the ruling colonial order, and 4. Boycott of the non-indigenous goods and services. The objective was to strengthen the position of the freedom movement and weaken, indeed inflict maximum damage to the colonial order. Mutinies among the armed forces were also effective in this sense, which shows the need for greater participation of the military in defending democracy at home. The following are some measures that could be taken as part of Europe's own anti-colonial movement with equal success. 1. The indigenous population must openly challenge the state-imposed immigrationist policies which violate and deny its fundamental and inalienable right to life and self-determination, for example, by demanding a referendum on immigration and population replacement, demanding a total ban of non-indigenous immigration, and initiating legal action against the authorities responsible. History shows that public opinion matters. In the past, public pressure has forced governments, including left-wing ones, to introduce pro-indigenous legislation, for example, aimed at restricting immigration. However, such steps have rarely been fully implemented in practice. In addition, they have been offset by covert countermeasures such as relaxation of immigration controls and encouragement of immigration through incentives like preferential employment, housing, and social welfare benefits. Therefore, of particular importance is 1. To raise consciousness in the indigenous population of the situation, which is that A. The political leadership is self-interested, disingenuous, and antagonistic to indigenous interests, and B. That the indigenous population is being replaced with immigrants, and 2. Make it aware of the fact that it is not only legitimate but necessary to express concern and to pressure politicians into genuinely addressing that concern in an effective, fair, and democratic manner. Indeed, this is a moral duty owed to future indigenous generations. 2. Efforts must be made to achieve a reduction in indigenous emigration. 3. Higher birth rates in indigenous communities must be encouraged through community and government support. I mean, the government is the one that's doing all this, right? So good luck trying to get them to just reverse course. 4. The indigenous population must be united, organized, and mobilized in opposition to official anti-indigenous policies. In particular, using all the legal means available, indigenous communities must aim to establish their own independent local governments, courts of law, political parties, media outlets, schools, religious organizations, and places of worship, as well as police and armed forces. That is a lot of organization to get done. 5. The indigenous population must set up fact-finding research and study groups to identify and investigate anti-indigenous interests, their history, policies, mode of operation, connections, sources of support, and impact on indigenous society with a view to monitoring, exposing, and taking action against them. 6. The indigenous population must boycott or take other suitable action against all media, educational institutions, charity organizations, business enterprises, sport organizations, religious bodies, and other governmental or non-governmental projects working against its interests. 7. Indigenous paramountcy must be introduced and enforced. Indigenous or native paramountcy, that's a new word for me, is the morally and legally sound principle whereby the interests of a native population are paramount and override those of immigrant populations. It was first introduced by the British government in the 1920s to safeguard the rights and the futures of East African natives who were under threat from non-native Indian and European immigration. It was promoted at the time by church leaders, both Catholic and Protestant, and in particular by leading political ideologists such as Sidney Webb, who controlled the Labour Party's colonial policy. Philip Noel Baker, Parliamentary Private Secretary to Foreign Secretary Arthur Henderson, and a leading agent of Milner-Fabian interests, called for it to be enshrined in international law. In light of the fact that the last few decades have seen a dramatic reversal of the demographic situation, with Europe's indigenous population now being as much under threat from non-European immigration as Africa's natives were from non-African immigration, it is both imperative and proper to now apply this principle in Europe. That is the end of the chapter. Told you we had a lot to read through tonight. I hope you believe me. Very powerful stuff indeed. And sobering, and concerning, and upsetting, and kind of stressful to read all that. The worst part is because you can see it all going on. Well, I can see it all going on, certainly, when I'm out and about. It's hard to miss it. Going town centres, shopping centres, look at the businesses that are being run on your high street. There's a really weird situation going on, you know, and certainly there's very little in place for the indigenous population, right? And well, that's because we're all horrible potato-eating racists. It's our own fault. Stop it, white people. But I think the intro video and all those headlines we looked at really reinforce Ratiu's point that there is institutionalized bias against indigenous populations of Europe and the countries that the people of Europe have gone and settled, right? And this drumming up of tensions between indigenous and non-indigenous, you can see where it's going. I was just thinking as I was reading that bit there that all they need to do is shut down all the airports, you know. They've done that in the last 5 years. Shut down all the airports and then squeeze like the supply chains, and you would have absolute chaos because people would very quickly form into groups and gangs. And who do you think out of the natives and the non-natives, who do you think will have stronger communities and in-groups that are going to bandy together and look after themselves and their own? You know, that's a genuine question. Be interested to hear your answers. I know what I think would happen in that kind of situation. So I think the stage is being set. And I think now more than ever, it's very important to know the people you live among, build relationships, raise awareness that this is a situation that might happen, start trying to mitigate the effects of such a situation. Put yourself in a position where you'll have a better chance at making it through that without too much harm done. So I don't know. I don't have very strong solutions and advice to come up with right now. I appreciate all his suggestions at the end of that chapter, but I also feel like it's going to require you got to get people to care about what's going on. You got to get them to see it. You got to deprogram them of all the anti-white programming that they've already absorbed and accepted into their lives. That's a massive bit of work, deprogramming people and quote unquote waking them up and red pilling them, or however you want to phrase it. Huge amount of work, and can only really be done on a one-to-one basis or a one-to small group basis. And even then it can take a massive amount of time, because you got to really listen and figure out where they're at. And you can only supply them with that one next step. You can't put them on a rocket ship and take them all the way instantaneously in one afternoon, right? You got to see where they're at using your patience and your active listening and your compassion and your empathy, and then just provide that one little next step to move them along. And it's a very slow process. And how many people are doing it? How much time are we all spending doing that with the people in our lives around us? So sobering, very sobering chapter, I think. Indeed. So Celine Lyon over on YouTube asks, anti-Western, what does that even mean? I think it's to do with like the values. The West is kind of associated with like Christianity, with the Enlightenment, with the thinkers, the movers and the shakers that came up with a variety of philosophical thought and scientific breakthroughs and so on. But I think it a lot of these things were discovered and known elsewhere in other parts of the world at various times as well. So it's a good question. It'd be good to have somebody define exactly what is Western and anti-Western. Celine Lyon says, discerning, handsome and masculine men are attractive only to same said discerning women. It's kind of the name. Apparently male and female is related to animals, not humans. Okay. I'm not quite sure how to respond to all that. Discerning, and I'm just going to take it as a compliment of some kind. But I kind of see what you're saying. I think. I'm not sure though. Frank Lennon says, equitable global society, i.e. a grey blob. Yeah, that's the plan, I think. Another superb chapter. Thanks so much. You're very welcome. LJ says, blimey, what a chapter. Yeah, quite a chapter. Very sobering and very, you can make a difference and you can make an impact, but mainly on your immediate surroundings and in the immediacy of your families and colleagues and social circles that you already exist in. The idea of like a big societal shift is pretty far-fetched to my mind. Too many people are too hopelessly addicted to the mainstream, which we started off talking about, at the beginning of the stream, the broadcast tonight. The mainstream, live stream. I'm getting all the streams mixed up now. So, very sobering, but on a case-by-case, family-by-family, individual basis, change can still be made. Preparations can be put in place. And there's a variety of things. I won't go through them all right now. I've said them all before. Over on Rumble, we've got Heidi. She's back. Hello. She says, wow, still going. I don't let it stress me out anymore, but it's important not to bend the controllers and especially not to be controlled. Not to bend to the controllers and especially not to the controlled. Yeah, I totally agree. Maintain your independence of thought, mind, spirit, say your prayers, and concentrate on cultivating spiritual health and wellness and well-being. I think that's a very good, important aspect as well, right? Faith says, yes, the anti-white privilege brainwashing is horrible and powerful to the young. My black niece, who's in the financial world, has a white boyfriend who's an accountant and spits this stuff out. Oh, it's a mind virus that runs deep and has been expertly implanted in too many people's minds. ESP over on Odyssey says, tech has been aggressively hidden. Medicine has been skillfully denied to us. Reality has been manufactured. Brilliant. I really like all three of those points. You made a very good trilogy of quotes there. Yes, we have a long way to go. I agree, ESP. I really do. And LJ is saying that she's trying with her daughters and hopes to pass information on. That's all you can do. Plant seeds, water them, be curious, be open, be kind, be compassionate, be patient. Don't push people any faster than they are capable of moving, right? You wouldn't get behind an elephant and push it and expect it to move any faster than it's going to move. It's a similar kind of thing with people. You've got to be tactical and usually a non-judgmental approach where space is provided for that person to express whatever it is the best way of doing that. Building trust, having a non-judgmental approach, and asking questions, and recognizing where there is no room for an uplifting of awareness, because that happens plenty of times as well. Some people, you just have to say, this person's never going to be interested in it doesn't care about it and is never going to get it, no matter what I do or say. And you got to be able to recognize those people as well. Not cut them out and not give up on them as such, but recognize that some people can start paying attention and learning about this kind of thing, and other people can't. They just can't. So I think we're gonna have to leave it there. So thank you all so very much. Bitcoin Mining, LJ, Frank, Celine, Lion. Who else have we got? Sham Anarchist was here. Timmy was here. Trevor McDonald as well. Slowboy Whiteboard was here earlier. And Matteo as well. And Elizabeth. Heidi, Sede, Sapiente, Faith, Armory1, and ESP. Thank you all so very much for hanging out tonight. I really appreciate it. I am exhausted. This was longer than I expected, but we got that chapter finished. And the next one we're going to be reading is Multiculturalism. We're on the downhill now on this book. And what a book it has been. 2 more chapters left, Multiculturalism and then Islamization. Should be fun. Not at all controversial. Good stuff. Thank you for hanging out. Please remember, if you want to support at any point, you can do so at allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. Shoot me an email, join the mailing list, send a donation, like, comment, share, subscribe, support, all that good stuff. It's much appreciated. But, you know, the most important thing is just take care of yourselves and each other, and create some space to do things that are nourishing for your spirit. Say some prayers, go for walks in nature, write a poem, paint a picture, compose a beautiful sonnet. I don't know. Just find ways to be human and don't spend so much time worrying, stressing over things that are out of your control, the big, large-scale, long-term agendas. There's not very much that any single one person can do about it, but there's a lot that you can do about your own personal life, right? A hell of a lot, probably a lot more than you can even imagine, and that is the best place to start. So have a lovely what day is it? It's Tuesday. Have a lovely Tuesday night. I'm going to be back continuing with the book on Friday. We've got a meetup in the device community tomorrow night, 6 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. UK time is the book club, where we're continuing with our reading of 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. And I'm telling you, if you want a change of pace and a little break from the Milner-Fabian catastrophe that is unfolding around us, this is a really good one. It's humorous, it's well written, it's insightful, and it will make you want to throw your television out the window. All right. Take care. Very grateful for everyone who hangs out, and I will see you all soon. God bless.